Salim, how are you today?
Very well, thanks.
Awesome. Keith, how's Bangkok, man?
Man, it's special. I'm excited about it. Just getting settled in, but it should be cool.
So Salim,
how long
you've
have you
lived
been there?
Yeah, go ahead, Keith.
What'd you say?
How long have you
Salim?
been in Bangkok?
Oh, it's my second day.
Oh, right. Oh, so
Yeah.
literally emptying the suitcases. Are you planning to be there for a while?
I am kind of just going for it, just giving it a shot.
Salim,
Very cool.
you've lived all over the place. Have you ever lived in that area of the world?
No, but I've spent quite a bit of time there. Years ago, I did the around the world backpacking trip and spent like several months crossing the whole of Indonesia.
Wow.
And I go to Thailand and Malaysia pretty often for business.
Amazing. Amazing. Cool. So in that area of the world, are they as obsessed with AI as the West?
No, mostly because they're not on the cutting edge of tech build out. They are building data centers pretty as aggressively as they can. They see things coming, but they're not on the edge of the conversation.
Okay. Interesting. So Keith, where do you want to start with Salim today? There's so many angles we can go down this because Salim's a crypto guy and an AI guy, which is kind of everything we want in a guest. So I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, Salim, I wanted to start off asking you, why are you a transhumanist? Apparently, that's what people are calling you. Talk to us about that. And what does that mean?
Why am I a transhumanist? So when I was building Singularity, you guys know my background a bit, or should I
Yes.
just?
Yeah,
Okay.
give it to everyone else, but we know it.
All right, so Canadian, originally from India, 10 years in Europe, 20 years in the US, so I'm pretty confused. Degrees in computing and theoretical physics, and then from Waterloo. And then I went to, when I got to Silicon Valley, I ended up as the head of innovation at Yahoo, running their incubator. Learned a fundamental lesson that when you try anything disruptive in a legacy environment, the immune system attacks you. And went from that to helping build out Singularity University, which I built I was CEO for the first 2-3 years, and then I ran all the programs for another few years after that. And so that's kind of where the real journey starts. And then I wrote this book, Exponential Organizations, and I've been chasing that around ever since. Book did way better than I expected. Publisher very happy, wife less happy. And we built a global community around the book now that's now about 40,000 people that are consultants, technologists, innovators, entrepreneurs. And they use the mechanisms in the model in the book to build EXOs, as we call them. So I joined the board of the X Prize Foundation a few years ago, Peter Diamandis' foundation, and I'm trying to shepherd my community and kind of help communicate the radical transformation that's happening in the world right now. So that's the very quick summary. Remind me of the question. I forgot it already.
Go ahead, Keith.
Why are you a transhumanist?
Oh, why am I a transhumanist? Okay, so when the first article came out about Singularity University, was in CNET, and it said NASA announces Singularity University, which is being led by Peter Diamandis, Ray Kurzweil, and the prominent transhumanist Salim Ismail. And I literally had to go, what the hell is a transhumanist? And I had to look it up because I'd never heard the term before. So a transhumanist is apparently somebody that augments themselves via technology. And honestly, I have no idea what that means. Keith, you got headphones on, you've augmented yourself. Does that mean you're a transhumanist? I don't know. It turns out the minute you get a vaccination as a child, you're technically a cyborg. And so does that make you a transhumanist? So I think we've been using technology from the beginning of time to augment ourselves, spectacles, contact lenses, whatever. So I think that's a kind of a moot point. We use technology to make our lives better in 1,000 different ways. So I think I think the traditional term is you put technology into yourself to augment yourself, like RFID chips under the skin, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's a bit. In that traditional sense, I'm not really a transhumanist. If we've got a brain computing interface, I'd rather use the phone, which is on the outside and can be upgraded easily, rather than trying to stick things inside of the body where they can get infected and you can't upgrade them as easily. So that's my quick answer to that.
So no Neuralink for you?
Not certainly not. I don't want to be the first one. Let's just put it that way. And it turns out the brain upgrades more easily. The phone upgrades more easily outside the brain than inside the brain.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. That makes complete sense. And I listen to you talk on the Moonshots pod all the time. And so I know that
So you know a lot of my philosophy around some of this stuff.
I do. Yes, I listen to you literally every single week. So yeah,
wow.
I help deal with the titles and thumbs for the show. So I have to listen to everything that you say, and it's always awesome stuff. But there's one, I was listening to your older talks because I've obviously listened to you all your current opinions, but I wanted to go back and see how things have changed. And there was one quote from a talk that I really think is so prevalent right now, where you said, if you attempt disruptive innovation in any large organizations, its immune system will come and attack you. Can you explain what that means and how that practically applies to tech today?
Yeah, so all organizational designs, certainly traditional organizational designs, are top-down pyramid-style military command and control structures, right? And they're designed for two things. Typical organizations are designed for efficiency and for predictability. Those two attributes. So if you're a Procter & Gamble, you're trying to deliver the same box of Tide into 1 million retail locations at the same level of quality. Same with McDonald's, for example. But today, in a world as volatile, you need to be architected for adaptability, flexibility, agility, and speed, which is very different from traditional military style command and control structures, which are designed for resisting change and withstanding risk. Okay? Now, that worked in a time when markets didn't change very often, et cetera, et cetera. But we're seeing the most volatile business era in the history of mankind. And so therefore, those old structures literally don't work. And when I was at Yahoo, I was running their incubator, and our job was, okay, there's 3,000 ideas across Yahoo. At any time, we should be building the top 5. That was the directive we had from Jerry Yang, who was the CEO at the time. And I was like, well, how much more fun could anybody have than that, right? So we put together a team of like 30, the best developers in the world, divided into 5 teams, and we were building stuff out. And it turned out the more disruptive an idea we came up with, the less the company could handle it. Why? Because it had got itself organized in a classic matrix structure with products on the verticals and horizontals like legal, HR, branding, privacy, etc. And every time we were trying to do something, you have to get clearance from all those layers, which takes time. And the structure disincents risk-taking. Like the legal guy wants the same terms of service across all 120 Yahoo web properties. He doesn't want somebody going rogue. His life's a mess otherwise, right? And so the org structure for Yahoo is antithetical to the industry they're in. Because if you're on the consumer internet, the two characteristics you better have are speed and risk.
Yes.
Right. And so I kept poking the mothership going, listen, guys, we're structured the wrong way. And so, and then I was talking to the CTO of Autodesk and complaining, like, how the hell do you deal with this? Because I'm facing this. And he goes, oh, you have an immune system problem. And I went, ding, that's it. And so that's been part of my verbology ever since. And it's bad in big companies. This is why big companies can't innovate. They cannot deal with disruptive innovation. This is why Microsoft invests in OpenAI rather than trying to build it itself, okay? Because the antibodies in the company will attack that. Okay? And this is true for every large organization, but it's actually worse in public sector, because there we have the regulatory is the immune system. We have bankers fighting Bitcoin. We have taxis fighting Uber. And we've decided to solve on focusing this problem after the book came out, because if you don't solve that immune system problem, it doesn't matter what the tech breakthroughs are, we can't implement them. Right? Totally. So we spent quite a bit of time solving for that. And we started with big companies. We crafted a 10-week engagement that we piloted with Procter & Gamble and said, all right, give us your worst performing division. We're going to see if we can hack culture at scale. And now we've done it like 100 times with big companies around the world, Black & Decker, HP, Visa, etc. And then we formed a nonprofit to do the same thing in public sector, because now you need to change policy, and that's much harder. And we it takes 16 weeks, but it works. We've done it like 6 or 7 times, most notably with the mayor of Miami a few years ago. So a lot of the buzz around Miami is we were able to get public sector to view disruptive technology as an opportunity, not a threat.
Keith actually went to the University of Miami, so
dude. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Francis Suarez was absolutely, helping to lead some of the charge around that technology. Him and then Mike. I don't know if you would have known Mike. He was I think the CTO of the city at the time.
Okay. I didn't know Mike. I met Francis a bunch of times. I was named like the Entrepreneur of the Year in Miami a few years ago. And so I met him at the kind of the welcome gala for that. And the real work we did was actually with the mayor of Miami-Dade County.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
And his name was
Cava.
Jimenez,
Oh, okay.
and then now Cava. And I kind of work with them both. And we were able to change that public sector perception. And then it becomes very much more much easier to absorb disruptive ideas, right?
Totally.
It's not an automatic no.
Yes, which is what most things are. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, talk to any banker about Bitcoin and they get like hives and stuff.
Yes,
you know,
they all
can't-
get so afraid so fast. It's crazy.
Yeah, they're all swimming in the soup of fiat currencies and they can't step out of the water there. And therefore anything outside that is a threat. There's actually, can I step sideways for a second?
Go for it. Of
Because
course,
there's a
let's
really
do.
great and really important anthropological basis for this. Peter Diamandis observed this when he wrote the book Abundance. And he noted that we all have in the back of our brains this little organ that's called an amygdala. It's the size of like a walnut. And it's an evolutionary mechanism that's scanning for danger on a nonstop basis. Okay? It actually goes in front of your neocortex. And it's the first, all the senses go through the amygdala before they get to the brain. Okay. And so because 10,000 years ago, when we were running around the plains of Africa, if you heard a noise in the bushes, you ran because bad news could kill you. Okay. Good news doesn't kill you. So if you missed a piece of good news, you might miss some fruit that you could eat. If you missed a piece of bad news, you died. So our brains are literally 10 times more likely to pay attention to bad news as opposed to good news because of that survival bias. Which means that this is why Fox News does really well. You know, if you watch Fox News, you're going to die this week, right? If you're lucky, it'll last till next week, but you're going to die next week. But you're going to die. And Peter calls CNN the crisis news network, right? Because you watch every kidnapping or bank robbery on real-time, high-definition, streamed to 20 devices. You literally think the world is going to go to hell, and you vote on that. And you end up with Trump or Brexit or Bolsonaro or whatever. So this is the incredibly difficult anthropological basis. And this becomes doubly hard when we come up with new technologies, because when you see a new technology like autonomous cars, the first reaction is danger.
Yes.
Because our brain, and the first reaction is, oh my God, ban the car because the car might kill somebody, right? As my colleague Brad Templeton used to say, we don't want to be killed by robots. We'd much rather be killed by drunk people, which is what's happening today. And so this is the kind of really difficult thing. Up to date, the only way of solving that we found is psychedelics. And
really?
So we have to figure out some basis around that.
Fascinating. So I have another quote here from another one of your podcasts, which is a point that's tightly connected to this. And one that I really agree with is that you said human beings would rather be comfortable than happy.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that play out now with all of this, because this could be one of the best times ever to be alive, but fear is at a near all-time high, it seems.
Fear is at a near all-time high because people really resist the unknown, right? And the unknown represents danger. And so therefore they shy away from anything dangerous, even though it may be 10x better for them. Okay. And they have to overcome that. And there was an article that came out in Salon.com a few years ago. Okay. And the title of the article was "The Single Worst Discovery About the Brain Ever." That was the headline of the article. So, and obviously kind of somewhat clickbait oriented. And what they did was they took people that had a deeply held religious or political belief, like abortion or a Republican or a Democrat or something. And then they gave them direct evidence that contradicted that belief structure. Okay. And they found three things happened. First was the rejection of the evidence. Fine, understandable. The second was a little more weird. It turned out in rejecting the evidence, it reinforced your belief structure. It was like a physics reaction of you push it away and you become stronger. And they were like, well, that's weird. The third, which is what led to the title of the article, was it turned out the more mathematically literate you were, the more likely you were to reject the evidence because you thought you knew, right? And that's depressing as hell, because that means you can never use an evidentiary basis to convince somebody of something. You have to use a narrative structure.
Yes.
And it was a really profound kind of observation about the human condition. And I go back to that. I once had a co-founder in one of my companies that kept tanking the company because he was comfortable being a genius and poor.
Mm.
And the more wealthy we became and the more successful, the more he was freaking out. And you're like, wow. So that was the root of that observation.
Yeah, I had the same thing when I had an employee who I actually only found it out when they showed the new Instagram feed where you could see what other people liked, because I didn't talk too much about politics or anything like that. And I found out that one of my key employees hated money. And I was like, okay, no wonder we're not going to make money here. Like obviously he hated every like big company. He hated capitalism. I'm like, okay, well, no wonder he's sabotaging everything he touches. Like this only makes sense. And as a marketer by trade, like everything you're saying makes total sense to me. And it's why the algorithms are so effective, is because they allow you to reinforce your confirmation biases. And then also to see the opposite opinion looking so wrong. They're really quite sophisticated. I actually tweeted something about that like just last night. Go ahead, Salim.
Just a quick funny story here.
Yeah,
so I'm hiring people for Brickhouse, and this is Yahoo's incubator, and they gave me free reign to hire whoever I wanted. And we hired a guy called Evan Henshaw Plath, who's an American guy who grew up in England, and he ran the website protest.net. He was a full anarchist. And had been arrested for protesting WTO trade meetings and stuff, right? And the HR people at Yahoo are like, "Wait, who are you hiring?" And I said, "You said I could hire anybody. We want that kind of totally independence thinking in our world, right?" And my dad told me something very profound. He said, "Look, to be successful in the world today, you have to be an evidentiary, erudite, free thinker." Free thinking meaning you have to be outside all the religious or structural biases that you've grown up in the world, like bankers with fiat currency. Erudite, you have to be clear in what you're able to say. And evidentiary, you have to go where the data tells you.
Totally.
And it's one of the more kind of interesting comments I've heard.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. It's also really hard to do. We got a question from the chat that actually connects to another point that I had written down, where you had said that, what was it, where you said that until you're 7, you're basically defining who you are becoming. I forget exactly how you said it, but RD says the brain is interesting. Is this something you learn in childhood? Can you change the brain? You said something about 7 yeyears old. What was that specific?
Yeah, the all religions, right, work in the following way. Do you take a young child before they're 10 or 12, and you give them an absolute truth, an assumptive truth, like Muhammad is the last prophet, Jesus is the son of God, Mary was a virgin, whatever it is. And then you bind it into them with ritual repetition and a lot of sweets, a lot of sugar.
Yes,
and you'll notice at all religious functions, there's a ton of sugar in there, okay? And then that wires into the brain of a young person before the neocortex forms, which is why the age is important. And then you've wired into the limbic system, and then when you try and provoke or kind of change that deeply held belief that Mary was a virgin, you evoke a fight or flight response. And so this is why the Jesuits have an old saying. They say, "Give me the boy until the age of 7, I give you the man," because we'll hack the kid in our way of thinking and tailor him that way. Now, how do you solve for that? You have to do a truckload of neuro-linguistic programming, Tony Robbins, landmark education type stuff. Psychedelics are a pretty effective way. We've got all these neuroplasticity things. Let me show you something. This is a gadget called a neurovisor. Right, I got this I bought this recently. So you put it on, and there's an app that flashes lights at you, and you play music at the same time, and it increases the plasticity of the brain.
You should put that on for a second, but leave it on your head for a second.
You want me to put it on? There, it looks like that.
That looks awesome.
Totally clear. You don't want to be in an airport lounge wearing this thing, but it's kind of incredible. Like you put on different types of programs depending on whether you're looking for relaxation or shape or whatever, and you can literally feel your brain rewiring itself. And the combination of sound and light flashes and binaural beats and whatever are all designed for doing that. Psychedelics is the easiest and most permanent way, but then you have to take psychedelics and go on a hero's journey.
Totally. Keith, you got something
on that? I mean, there's been a lot of advancement. I think like Texas has been like super forward about some of the development of like psychedelic drugs as
therapeutics.
therapeutics and stuff like that. Do you follow any of that? I know it's like a budding industry. Do you invest in stuff like that, or even look at it?
I'm not invested just because I'm totally tapped out putting money into building this ecosystem and the few angel investments that I made. I'll give you one that I did invest in called Focus at Will. So a guy called Will Henshaw used to play guitar for the Eurythmics, the band from the 80s. He started building a platform of music that when you play the music, it's like a Pandora style streaming service. It puts your brain in a focused alpha state. Okay. And so when your brain is in that brain frequency, your productivity increases like 500%. It's like crazy. So if you're a software developer, or a student, or a knowledge worker of any kind, this is like really like gold, right? Because 500% productivity is no joke. So I've done some stuff like that. I'm hugely enthusiastic about psychedelics. So a few years ago, I had a kind of a bit of a life-changing event where a political consulting firm out of Europe approached me, and they said, "Hey, we want to partner with you." And I said, "How?" And they said, "Oh, we use your book to advise heads of state." And I was like, "Completely not intended for that. What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Well, that's how we use it." And it turned out to be 36 presidents and prime ministers.
Wow.
Okay? Yeah, including at the time the prime minister of Thailand. So I went to Thailand and I did a session with the prime minister in Bangkok and the top 50 CEOs in the cabinet and whatever. Once that's like a gift from the universe that you can't say no to. Like you have to, because we have a community and credibility and some reputation, but now we have access. And so I did a year of psychedelics to make sure my mind, body, and spirit was lined up for what was coming. It was kind of easily the most profound thing I've ever done. I'm a huge fan. They've now found, I think Colorado is the most advanced in terms of playing with this stuff. But they found you can cure PTSD and depression with one treatment of MDMA, psilocybin, ketamine, different kind of psychedelics. It's kind of amazing, the outcomes. Completely threatens the pharma industry.
Totally.
And so it's a huge kind of challenge. The immune system is strong in that world. I remember interviewing the head of Google Health at a conference a few years ago, and there's about 500 people in the audience, and I'm doing this interview in San Francisco. So I said, "Listen, I'm Canadian, totally do not understand the American healthcare system. Can you describe it?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, it's really easy. The American healthcare system is designed for three things. It's designed to get you sick and keep you sick as long as possible without killing you." And I'm like shocked, right? And the whole audience is like, yeah, that's about right. That's about right. And it just completely blew my mind. So some big differences in kind of attitude around some of that stuff.
So when you said that psychedelics were one of the most profound things that you ever experienced, whenever people describe psychedelics, they say similar things, but to someone on the outside, that's a very like arbitrary way of voicing it. Can you speak to like
specifics?
Yeah, if possible. I know it's not easy.
No. I went pretty deep on this before I did any, because I wanted to be sure as to what was going on. So somewhere around 2012, 2013, we had a lecturer come through Singularity University. And what he was doing was giving people different dosages of different psychedelics and putting them through an fMRI machine. Okay. So an fMRI machine allows you to scan the brain in real time. You can actually see a single neuron firing in the brain in real time in an fMRI machine. So you give somebody 50 milligrams of mushrooms versus 100 versus 200, and you see what neural circuits are lighting up or what neural circuits are being suppressed by that thing. And when I first saw that, I was like, well, that's cool, because now we have a feedback loop, right? In the 70s, when they first discovered this stuff, Steve Jobs and all these guys in Silicon Valley, they're just chucking stuff down. They didn't have really any idea what they were doing, any evidence, let's put it that way. But now we know exactly what happens. So take, for example, ayahuasca, the stuff in the Amazon that you drink, or the frog bufo, right? That's DMT, dimethyltryptamine, okay? And DMT is a molecule in your brain that's a naturally occurring hormone. It's released by your brain twice in your life. Okay, once at birth, once at death. Go figure. Okay, they think it's because to ease the transformation from one state to another, one phase to another. So they found in the Amazon that if you take this plant A and cross it with root B and pound it into a broth, it gives you a hunk of DMT, which goes through the blood-brain barrier. So you have essentially a near-death experience, and you have an out-of-body experience. And so people take this. And medically, what it does is it suppresses the parietal lobe, and where your parietal lobe is where your three-dimensional sense of self sits. So when you suppress that, you have access to your higher consciousness in a way that otherwise you have to do a truckload of meditation and tantra or whatever to get access to that. But now you get instant access to your higher divinity.
Got it.
And so when you kind of connect the dots with the data, you're like, well, that makes sense. And so people drink this and they literally lift out of their body, depending on how much and the form in which you take it.
Totally.
And DMT is also released when you dream too. Am I incorrect about that?
It depends on the dreams, but yeah, like so. When you do tantric work or kundalini work, that's a DMT. When anybody has a religious experience, that's a DMT release. When people have a near-death experience and they see the white light in a tunnel, that's actually a DMT release in the brain. So there's artificial ways of getting to it, but you have to do years of kundalini work before you can get to that. And some dream states result in a DMT release.
I was going to bring this up later, but I feel like the topic calls for it. So you mentioned on another podcast how you actually got out of New York before 9/11 because you have a psychic relative.
Yeah.
So can you explain like how that whole thing happened? And then what are your views on the topic of like psychic mediums and all of those things?
Wow, there's about 6 things baked into there. Okay.
Sorry.
Again, I tend to be more evidentiary than anything. And I have a relative who's psychic, and she called me up in August 2001 and said, what are you doing the first 2 weeks of September? And I said, well, I'm working. I've got stuff to do. And she said, well, I want you to take a trip. I want you out of New York City the first 2 weeks of September. I was like, I can't just, take a break. I'm right in the middle of a bunch of stuff. But
did she say why, or just
no? She just said, I want you out of New York City. She said, you need a break. I want you to leave. And she kept calling every couple of days. And finally, I was like, I do need a break. I'm pretty wrecked. So I went to Switzerland to visit some friends of mine from India that were bringing the new baby to visit up there. So I went out there, and then I'm in Switzerland. 9/11 happens, and a couple of days after that, I look at my calendar and I noticed I had a meeting in the World Trade Centers that Tuesday morning at 9 a.m., which I canceled to go on this trip.
Wow.
So when I could get through, I asked this relative of mine, holy shit, did you know? And she's like, I knew something bad was going to happen. I knew you should not be there.
Wow.
And I've gone to enough psychics, and I went to one who was like ridiculously accurate. What you would do is you'd give them she'd give you a deck of playing cards, and you'd shuffle the deck and cut the deck and hand it back. And she'd hit record on a cassette player and start flipping the cards over and speaking for 90 minutes. You wouldn't say a single word. And after 90 minutes, she'd hit stop, hand you the cassette, and that was it. And she charged like $40 for this or something, right? And she was also freakishly accurate. And once I asked her, how do you do this? Like because you've got no information. I'm sitting here like a stone. All you have are those playing cards. How are you able to tell that I was in a German-speaking country when 9/11 happened, type of thing? And she gave me the best metaphor I've heard for psychic phenomena. And she said, imagine you're driving a car down the road, and it's the road of your life type of thing. And I'm sitting in the car with you when you come and see me. You can see 20 feet out the front of the car. For whatever reason, I can see a mile down the road. I don't know why. So I can see if you keep going, this is where you're going to end up. You could turn at any point, in which case all bets are off. And I can see behind where you've been. Right? I can see 2 miles down below, and I can see a mile ahead. And I thought that was the best framing I've ever heard, where they kind of look at your energy or interpret stuff about you and come up with something. How they come up with specifics like I've seen, I don't know, because that's just a whole other level of surrealness. So you can't really take it for granted. You just kind of go, well, that's interesting. What do you do with that? And you kind of go with it and see keep an open mind and be evidentiary as it shows up.
I've never heard you talk about like aliens or the UFO phenomenon very much. What is your 2 cents on that subject?
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
And we lack that.
And we really lack the extraordinary evidence part. Easy to make the claim. You have to remember, if you go back a few thousand years when most of our early religions were formed, right? If somebody said, yeah, I saw a 900-foot Jesus in my backyard, there's no reason to disbelieve them. You go, they sound pretty credible. Why not? I'll believe them, right? And that's how religions grew up. Today, people are like, where's the Instagram video? And if you don't have that, forget about it, right? And now we were entering the deep fake era where you kind of question it anyway. So you need that evidentiary basis. I will suggest that it's near impossible for a religion to appear today, and it has to do with what do we mean by truth. And I can get into that if you want.
Please, yeah.
You want to get into that?
Yes, very much so.
You guys are right out there. Okay. So there was I do a late night kind of a French salon session that I do for all the Singularity events and the Peter's conferences and stuff. It's like a discussion on metaphysics, philosophy, and the meaning of life. Alcohol mandatory, that type of thing. And I start off with a discussion on truth, because we get lost in what the hell do we mean by truth. And there was a philosopher in the 50s called Arthur Koestler, who came up with a really interesting framing for truth. And he said, knowledge equals justified true belief. Okay. And so I was a recovering management consultant, so I graphed a 2x2 on whether something is more true or less true on the y-axis. Okay. And either something is more justifiable or less justifiable on the x-axis. Okay, so if you've got stuff that's true and justifiable, it tends to be scientific truth. That's the top right, where you've got evidentiary basis for something. Third parties can repeat your experiment and show that if I throw this ball in this angle, it's going to land over there at that spot, right? And we can run those calculations and figure it out. If you go to the top left, you have truths that are maybe true but not justifiable. Okay, so those are like psychic phenomena, sixth sense, intuition, intuitive truths, right? So I may see a 900-foot Jesus in my dreams, but I don't have the evidentiary basis to show that's true. It may be true, but it's not justifiable. Okay. On the bottom left, you've got stuff that's not true, but it is justifiable, right? So a lot of stereotypes fit into this quadrant. Like Italians are loud, right? And generally it's true, but for a particular Italian, it may or may not be true. But the stereotype is true. There's an old joke in Europe that says, in heaven, the cooks are French, the police are English, the lovers are Italian, and the Swiss organize everything, right? And in hell, the cooks are English, the police are German, the lovers are Swiss, and the Italians organize everything. And that's an example of a stereotypical truth, right? It's general in the broad sense, but not general. And then on the bottom left, you've got stuff that's not justifiable and not true. And those tend to be religious truths or absolute truths or assumptive truths. Like Mary was a virgin is an assumptive truth, right? Muhammad is the last prophet is an assumptive truth. You're asked to assume that and as a point of faith, and then you build your religious structures on top of that. Once you see that, then it becomes much easier to have a discussion about what's real or what's not real. You can say, okay, that's an intuitive truth, that's a stereotypical truth, etc., etc. Most people take absolute truths and relate to them as true rather than relating to it as a belief system, right? So I'll give you a real anecdote here. So I was at the Vatican, okay, because they called me up once saying, hey, the Pope's got the worst immune system ever. Can we have you come in and do a conversation? And I did a workshop for the 80 most senior leaders there. I was talking to the historian at the Vatican, okay, the guy who ran the archives. And I said, listen, if you talk to biblical scholars, the general consensus is that the Mary was a virgin framing is a translation error, okay? And it turns out if you talk to any biblical scholar, they'll tell you this, that when they translated the Bible from Hebrew to Aramaic, they used to use the young maiden Mary. When they translated it to Aramaic, there was no word for young maiden, so they used the word virgin. Okay? And every historian will tell you, yeah, you can see in the version control problem, and it changed from young maiden to virgin. And so I said to the historian at the Vatican, is that true? And he's like, oh yeah, it's true. It's a translation error. I'm like, wow, why don't you fix it? And he's like, are you kidding? You can't fix that. You can't. It's too baked into everything to do with Catholicism. You can't fix it. And you're like, wow, the whole premise of the religion is based on a translation error. Okay? And so that's what I mean by an absolute truth, right? It's patently not true, but it's definitely justifiable, or it ends up being justifiable. And so the problem with religions is most people will take belief structures and they will relate to those belief structures as true.
So when it comes to artificial intelligence,
okay,
where do some of the beliefs that you see in the common perception today that kind of fall into these different categories that you're talking about, or specifically maybe the non-verifiable non-truth or verifiable non-truth?
It's difficult to say because AI is such a different animal than anything we've ever seen before. Okay. So I use the example of the Google's PageRank algorithm, okay, which is an AI that crawls billions of web pages and ranks them by how relevant they may be to your search query, right? And it puts weightings on those, et cetera, et cetera. Those weightings, when added to neural networks and what's called backpropagation, is where you get LLMs, and the Transformer paper came from that. Okay, so in 2017, I was living in Toronto, and Jeffrey Hinton did a talk at U of T, and I went for that conversation. And we asked him during the Q&A, because he said we're kind of reaching the end of deep learning, because that was his basic contribution to AI. And I said, well, what's next? And he said, we don't know, but we need another breakthrough to take AI to the next level. And we don't know what that is. And literally 3-4 months later, the Transformer paper was published by Google that led to LLMs and ChatGPT and all the large language models. And what they do is by kind of putting huge computational power behind documents and words and et cetera, and then recalibrating depending on your query, and then extracting some sense of intelligence from it. Okay, so if you take Google's PageRank algorithm that scans web pages, it's creating a form of intelligence that we've never seen in the world before. But it's a data matching system and a signal from noise system that is unlike anything, certainly unlike any human intelligence. It's very orthogonal to human intelligence. It's not replicative of human intelligence. The issue that I see with AI, we anthropomorphize it very quickly, and we go, oh, that's human intelligence, that's AI, that's AGI, that's conscious, right? And so it looks conscious. You know, like I look at the two of you, you look like you're self-aware, so I attribute self-awareness to you. Right? Self-awareness is a subset of consciousness if we talk to most philosophers, right? Well, we have a huge challenge with understanding any of this. We have no definition of consciousness. We don't have a test for consciousness, right? And so you look like you're self-aware, so I attribute self-awareness to you. I often joke that I feel like I'm self-aware, but my wife disagrees, right? So it's hard to even have the conversation around some of these concepts. I remember asking Ray Kurzweil about this, and he very profoundly said, the problem we have is language is a very thin pipe to discuss such complex topics, right? I was like, wow, that's a really deep comment, but you're sidestepping the question, right? Well, what is intelligence in this sense? And here's my rant on that, and you'll hear me, Ben, on the podcast talking about this, and you'll hear me ranting about AGI. I go bananas when we talk about this because we equate AGI to human intelligence without knowing what human intelligence is and without understanding what AI intelligence is, right? We understand neither, but we equate the two very conveniently. So for example, a human being has about a dozen facets to intelligence. Okay? There's emotional intelligence. The IQ test measures two things. It measures the speed of thought processing and the ability to match concepts across frameworks. That's what the IQ test measures. But we have emotional intelligence. If you're an athlete, you have spatial intelligence. If you're you may have linguistic intelligence. Some people have musical intelligence, right? We have the Eastern concept of presence or awareness, which is a wholly different form of intelligence. When you're a business leader, you're using a lot of those different factors of intelligence to make judgment calls about stuff, right? None of that is in AI in the traditional model. So we're talking about AI being, oh my God, it's got an IQ of 140. Great, I can have the geekiest guy in the world, but he may be the most unsociable person in a party. And God help you if we put him on a basketball court, right? And so how does that work in? I'm actually writing a paper on this because I want to kind of highlight the the flaws in the current thinking. And the current thinking, the paper is looking at kind of about 3 or 4 broad branches of intelligence. Okay, so one is data processing, signal to noise thing. So if you're a hawk and you're looking down from the sky, you'll see a mouse moving on the ground, and all your intelligence is focused on seeing that small movement in this huge sea of field of vision. And so that's a signal to noise intelligence, right? And most data mining is signal to noise matching. If we're trying to find a molecule that causes a disease, that's a signal to noise problem. Okay. Then you've got a whole swath of physical intelligence, like moving around in the physical world. Driving is one example of physical intelligence. There's an animal called a sea squirt. Okay, and this thing runs around feeding in the ocean floor, and then it becomes it turns into an adult, like a caterpillar turning into a moth. When it becomes an adult, it plants itself on a rock and it filter feeds from then on. Okay, so weirdly, the first thing it does when it becomes an adult is it eats its own brain. Okay, and a neuroscientist pointed to the side. She goes, "Come outside, you idiot geeks, and look out in the world, and show me what has a brain." And you're like, "Well, bird has a brain, squirrel has a brain, cat has a brain. Tree does not have a brain, grass does not have a brain." And she's like, "Yeah, what do you see is the difference between those two?" And we're like, "Oh, well, we don't know." And she's like, "Yeah, that's how dumb you guys are. Stuff that moves around in the world needs a brain. If you don't move around in the world, you don't need a brain." Right? You're like, wow, it's kind of really profound, pretty obvious observation, right? But it turns out we mostly need our brains to physically move around and adapt to the reality of the three-dimensional time and space that we live in. And so that's a whole other type of vector, right? Then you've got the more spiritual aspect of the subjective experience of being alive. What David Chalmers calls the hard problem of consciousness is, how do you deal with what are called qualia, or subjective experience? Okay, so Ben or Keith, each of you is having a very subjective experience sitting in this chair, listening to this conversation, whatever's around you. That subjective experience cannot be copied or communicated in any way. Can't be stored. It's just an experience we have. And so we store some of it like memory, but we know our memory is really, really faulty.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We make them up when we fix memory. And in fact, it turns out a large rationale for why we sleep, one of the more fascinating things is that, by the way, we still have no idea why we sleep. Scientists have no idea. The best current hypothesis is that 2 things: physical rejuvenation, which only takes about 8 or 10 minutes a night, but the real rejuvenation is a real reason for sleep is a back-end processing and filing of experiences you had during the day, categorizing, sense making of all the stuff that happened during the day, and then physical rejuvenation. So those are the 2 rationale we have. But otherwise, we have no idea why we sleep. There used to be a big conference in Europe called Le Web, and I was asked to give a talk there by the founder. And he said, come and talk about whatever you like, love what you're doing at Singularity. So I decided neuroscience was going to be the topic because I knew least about it. So I interviewed all the neuroscientists that we had in our orbit, and I asked them each to define the brain. Okay. And the collective agreed definition was, I may have a word wrong here or there, but there was roughly this: the brain is a recursive, chaotic, fractal information processing system that may or may not lead to consciousness. Right? And you're like, that's all you got? That's the best you could come up with? That's how little we understand what's going on in this supercomputer up here.
So I wanted to ask you then, when it comes to this term artificial intelligence, what does that actually even mean to you? And do you think that it's the wrong term and that there's a better way to describe what it is that we're actually talking about here?
I don't know. Augmented intelligence would be one way I've heard it framed, right? I would not even use the word intelligence, because we don't have a word for intelligence. We don't have a definition for intelligence. We don't have a test, right? I'll give you another little weird anecdote. I remember talking to, we used to be based at NASA in Silicon Valley. So we had access to a lot of the NASA astronauts. And one of them had seen a lot of like animals in labs because they used to do free floating experiments. Because remember, before they went into space, they had no idea whether a human being could survive in 0G. right? So they were doing experiments with animals. They used to take planes and do big hyperbolas and hyperbolic waves, sine waves in the air to give you like a minute of free floatingness when you went over the hump of like going over a roller coaster. And then they would study animals in labs to see what was the response. And I asked him about consciousness and self-awareness, right? And he goes, "Oh, frog." I'm like, "Frog? Well, what does that mean?" And in his opinion, like for example, in his opinion, a mosquito doesn't know it's a mosquito. It's just an automaton operating on its genetic programming, right? A dolphin has self-awareness, definitely knows it's a dolphin. A dog definitely knows it's a dog. And for him, the boundary condition was about a frog, where he goes, "Yeah, a frog just about has the self-awareness and complexity to go, oh, I'm a frog." Right? So I actually asked him a question. I said, "Okay, is there a system in the world that has the requisite computing, processing, inputs and outputs where it suddenly might generate self-awareness?" Right? That would be an interesting conversation. And he goes, "Huh, let me think about that." And he comes back to me 2 days later and he goes, "I think I found one." And he goes, "Traffic systems." And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, I think traffic systems have the requisite sensing and input, output, and recursive feedback loops that one day it might generate self-awareness and go, oh, I'm a traffic system." And then two questions occur right then. What would it do, right? And how would we know? And we don't have an answer for either of those, right? So that we're like blind people groping in the dark, trying to understand what we're talking about here when we talk about
that's
intelligence.
dangerous? Do you think that's dangerous or no? Like,
yeah, could be, right? Like if atomic bombing system suddenly woke up and said, "Oh, I'm a nuclear arms system. Let's play with a nuclear bomb," it may not be so great. So this is why people are freaking out, right? This is why people are going, "Oh my God, we have an existential threat to humanity," not so much from deliberate, but from accidental or human engineered systems. Like for example, it would not be difficult to engineer a virus that was designed to hop across people, very infectious, and until it found a middle-aged bald Indian guy, don't activate. And when you find that bald middle-aged Indian guy, kill him, right? And which would not be a great outcome, for people like me. And so how do you defend against that is the really big question. And we don't have a clear answer to that. The amount of damage one person or a small team can do is growing exponentially. And our ability to restrict technology from one person or a small team is dropping exponentially. So that's why you get a lot of people freaking out. I have good news around it, which is that most of the reaction is the amygdala response, right? It's irrational. And we've not seen any direct threat. I was talking to the head of innovation. We had the futurist for the FBI as one of our faculty members at Singularity. Okay. And I said to him once, let me ask you a question. If I wanted to cause terror, I'd get like 6 people, have them drop a smoke bomb into 6 different New York subway stations. And you just completely paralyze the entire system. Everybody'd freak out because you'd see the smoke and would freak out. Why don't we see more of that? Because it wouldn't even be harmful. You just cause a huge problem, right? And he's like, the dirty secret is there's just not that many bad people out there.
That's what I always say.
That's the dirty little secret. And so that, but to your original question about intelligence, I would almost call it augmented intelligence. What we see today is mostly signal to noise processing in all these systems. The LLMs are really good at predicting the next word, and freakishly good at this. When you talk to the founders of these systems, they can't believe how good they are. But we're very, very far away from biological intelligence, physical intelligence, athletic intelligence, emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence. We don't even know what those are, let alone start going on about them. So when people say, "Oh my God, AGI is going to take over the world," I just kind of go, we have no idea what we're talking about.
Yep. I got one for you.
Sorry for the rant.
No, please always continue to rant. That's why you're here. You've got great ones. But most people who watch this stuff, and even a lot of people who watch your show, like, they're very afraid because they instantly go to, this is going to be a change, whether I like it or not. Net long-term may be amazing for us, but there's going to be a lot of people who are negatively impacted by that.
Yes.
Are people off base in those fears? And for those who, I guess I'll stop it there. I don't want to throw 40 questions at you.
Yes and no. It depends completely on your ability to tolerate change. Okay. So if you're stuck in your ways and you're a career middle market, mid-level manager at a manufacturing facility, and you are determined that you're not changing that forever. You've got 6 years to retirement, and that's it. That's what you're going to be. And when you see AI coming along, going, "Wow, an AI could do this job in 3 weeks," that creates a lot of fear, because now what do you do, et cetera, et cetera. And I got to highlight one thing here that's really, really a big deal, which is when you go back and look over the last 10, 15 years at all the futurists and their predictions about how AI would roll out, right, or robotics would roll out, including me, by the way, every single person said we're going to first automate blue collar work, but white collar work will automate way later. Okay. Every single one, not a single futurist in the last 20 years said we're going to automate white collar jobs first.
Why'd they say that? What was the rationale?
Because we assumed that human labor, physical labor, is much easier than mental labor, creative labor, right? Dealing with a difficult person on a customer service call has a whole form of, etc. So we assumed that we'd automate lawnmowers and whatever. And you've heard me go on. We can't even get the damn Roomba to work, right? It takes self-driving. It's taken us 20 years from 2005, when the DARPA Grand Challenge was won with the first self-driving car, to now to have it be mainstream. Okay. And even now it's like just tickling at the edges of being mainstream. I predicted about 10 years ago that my 4-year-old would never get a driver's license. Okay. So we got to move super fast. We got 2 years to hit that time frame. Otherwise, I'm going to be proven wrong. And that's going to be really embarrassing. Right. My kid's 14 right now. And so it's really hard to make these predictions. And this is where the genius of Ray Kurzweil comes in. He's able to make 30-year predictions with freakish accuracy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
It's absurd.
But the person that you described when you first started this point, I would say that's the majority of people, that they had a plan, they wanted to stick to it, and they have no desire to change off that course. And so what they do is they point and say, like, AI is threat, AI is problem, bad.
Yes. Plus the fact that the downside risk, right, of, hey, AI, go find a drone and put a gun fitted into the drone and go find that middle-aged Indian bald guy, right? That's bad. And so drones are an extended form of robots and AI. And we see what the potential is. Like the Ukraine-Russia war is being fought by 500,000 drones, right? And so you really have to rethink everything around armed conflict completely as we see the advent of that, which is very challenging to the traditional thinkers, where you have a tank and you have an infantry and you have whatever. It's completely antithetical to what's happening today. And so there are three categories of real fear. One is a bad guy with AI can do a lot more damage than they could 20 years ago. Accidental AI, which is called the alignment problem. I don't know if you've heard of that. So let's say I say to an AI, go make as many paper clips as you can, because we need a lot of paper clips. Okay. And the AI looks around the world and goes, okay, I need access to steel. Oh, I'm going to need access to a truckload of energy. So let's take all the energy from human beings and divert it towards making paper clips. And then you starve human beings of energy and maybe food, right? That's called the alignment problem, where you want to make sure that an AI, its objective function is geared to something aligned with human beings staying alive and evolving happily, etc. The best actual treatment I've seen of this is the movie Her, where a guy dates an AI that's of course has to look like Scarlett Johansson, and eventually the AI breaks up with him, and he says, "What? We were having a great time. Why are you breaking up?" And she's like, "Well, there's 5 million other AIs in the cloud where I can have 5 million conversations in real time, and your 1 liter brain in your head is just, too small. Have a nice life." And that's it. She breaks up with him. So I think that's the actual reality of what's going to happen. The AIs are going to evolve past us very quickly, and then they'll go. They're like ants. You don't bother with the ants. You don't try and kill all the ants. You just go, I'm off to bigger things than ants. And we think that's what's more likely to happen.
But I've probably killed a lot of ants in my life without even realizing I did that.
Yes, that's right. So be really nice to your AI. That's why Peter is very polite to the AI, because all those conversations are recorded in history. And if the AI ever turns, but then you're assuming that an AI might have vengeance, right? Which is a very, very human, very, very human thing.
Okay? Totally agree with that.
Yeah.
With one point that I had written down here, where with the job part. So in terms of labor, I think that's really why people are the most afraid of this, because we're survival creatures by nature. In the last little bit, we've needed money, which meant we needed a job.
Yeah.
How soon can people expect for radical change in the employment market? And where do you see who gets hit first?
Okay, how soon? Let's see. It's 2 p.m. now. It's like yesterday on that side, and it's a big deal. And certainly, let me speak to what's happening in education, and you'll get a glimpse of the broader labor question, which we can get to. So we've been doing education for the last few hundred years on what I would call supply side push education. Okay, what I mean by that is you get a bunch of kids into a classroom and you try and cram algebra into them, right? Mostly they're thinking about lunch, right? So that's not great. It's not matching to the individual styles of that. Some kids are visual learners, some are auditory learners, some are autistic geniuses and shouldn't be in that class anyway. All that stuff doesn't get taken into account. We'll go for the lowest common denominator. And when I say supply side, what I mean is all education today is designed to take a young child, train them through their early 20s to be ready for the job market. It's job schooling, right? Be an accountant, be an engineer, be a doctor, be a lawyer, be whatever, okay? And it's all supply side. Go learn a skill and then go to the job market and hope that you can find demand for that skill that you have, okay? It's all supply side, okay? But what's happening today, and what I'm raising my kids and Peter's raising his kids, we're shifting them to the demand side. Elon is the poster child of this. He's not going and getting an account, becoming the world's best accountant, and then going, where can I earn money? He's like, I want to solve a problem. I want to get people off Earth. I want to solve climate, and I want to solve transportation, right? And that becomes demand driven. Then he goes and finds the skills, the technologies, the capabilities to solve those problems. And so what we're going to see happen is kids are going to move more and more to the demand side, and education becomes a pull-based learning system rather than a push-based education system. Okay. Now, that transition is now going to happen very quickly, because a child with AI is learning between 5 and 10 times faster than sitting in a classroom.
Wow.
And that impedance mismatch will break the existing education system. Plus the fact that the idea of going and learning a degree for 4 years and then hoping to get a job for 50 years is gone. Therefore, the higher education system breaks all at the same time.
How long do you think universities will continue to exist?
I'm hoping, my kid is 14. I'm hoping in 4 years it implodes, because I think the idea of going to university is absurd in today's world.
Completely agree.
The luckiest thing that ever happened to me was I went to a co-op program at Waterloo.
I went to we actually copied your program. So I went to Guelph, and we actually copied your co-op program.
Yeah, it's a fantastic system, right? And where every 4 months you're going and working somewhere, you find your job is more about your work terms than what you learned. Right. And you've got a bunch of different work experiences, and you understand the only demotivating factor of a work term system and a co-op system is after a couple of these work terms, you realize that my work life has nothing to do with what I'm learning in the classroom, and just demotivates the hell out of you.
That's
right. So the minute I went through the co-op system, my grades started dropping, and I graduated with 0.1% that I needed to get a degree.
That's me. I did the same thing. That's so awesome.
You and I are simpatico on this. Keith probably aced all his classes, so the hell with him.
He's a smart
guy.
Anyway,
the entire system is flawed because the premise is flawed of a job. And so now when we talk about this on the podcast, pretty much the only occupation going forward is entrepreneur. Go find a problem you want to solve, and then go find the capabilities and take on some risk and go solve that problem. And if you solve the problem, there's a big upside in solving that problem.
These are the exact words that come out of our mouths on this pod as well. And I wanted to ask you, because you said you have 2 kids, is that right?
I have one.
One.
He's
Okay.
14. Peter has two twins. I'm a godfather to those twins.
And
And so those kids are kind of growing up together.
and what are the specific things that you're doing, right, to prepare them for this world that they're moving into?
Ever tried controlling a 14-year-old?
Not easy.
Not easy. No. So we're doing a couple of things. One, he has to take piano and music theory, because it allows your brain to operate in a totally different modality, and a huge amount of creativity comes from those different neural circuits happening. Number two, strong focus on athletics and moving around and just physically moving. It turns out kids learn best through kinetic and tactile sensations, like playing with Lego, and physically manipulating the world is where a huge amount of learning comes in, right? We have him in debate, a debate structure, which turned out to be a bad idea because he's really good at forming arguments against anything we want him to do now. So it turned out to be counterproductive for home life, but his brain is evolving the ability to make critical thinking arguments, etc. I'll give you a pointer to a woman out of Chicago called Nicole Dreisky, who has created something called Screen Smart. We think that's the future of education. We did a podcast with her, and she took the podcast and turned it into a book that's now on Amazon, just a couple of bucks. But we think she's actually solved the device, kids being addicted to their phones. She solved that problem.
What did she do?
It's what she realized was, instead of passively viewing media and doom scrolling, can you get higher order thinking engaged when you're doing that? So she created a bunch of different interventions, some at school, some at home, some with the kids, some with the parents. So you got all three systemic elements at play. And she's got it to a point where if you sit with a child for 15 minutes twice a week and ask them some leading questions while they're watching something, like, what do you think the director was thinking? What do you think why do you think the characters are doing that? If you were the director, what would you do differently? Etc. It turns out even when you're not with them, their higher order thinking is being triggered, and they're being self-reflective and self-aware while they're watching some media. And that turns out to be a positive reinforcement loop. She's done this with like 10,000 kids. The results are off the charts, unbelievable. So we can see the future. It's just not evenly distributed, as William Gibson famously said.
Totally. I think personally, I think kids will be fine for the most part. I do think that they'll adapt pretty well. My biggest area of concern is, say, like 18 to 35, 40, I think, actually, because they were so primed to go and put their skills to use and enter the workforce and hopefully get ahead. And I don't think that workforce is even going to exist. What is your advice for people in that range? Go ahead, Keith.
That was
really just become entrepreneurs. There's no way there's anything else.
But people fight that so much, Salim. Like, I've been trying to say that since I was like 18 years old. I saw this coming a mile away, and I said, we're all going to be entrepreneurs. We're going to have to be out of necessity. And everyone was like, you're crazy, you're crazy, you're crazy. And not everyone's like you, Ben. I hear that all the time. What do you say to those people?
Look, you're in a binary world today. You're either the disruptor or you're disrupted, right? It's like, so you either have to jump on that wagon or you're going to get crushed by it. You can use surfing metaphors. You can use whatever you want. You got to get ahead of that curve. And the only way to do it is to create your own future. And the only way to create your own future is to build a business or create an organization that operates according to the thing that you're most passionate about. And it turns out most people are really, really passionate about something.
Yes.
And so you find that thing. We call this your massive transformative purpose in the book. And then go build a community or join communities around that thing, and then build a business model around it and go launch that. Right. And we have very prescriptive models for this today. It is the single best time to be an entrepreneur in history, because
Totally agree.
So I just want to mention two things that are really important that are happening with technology today that your viewers may not be fully aware of. First is that we've seen Moore's law for 60 years now in computation, double every 18 months the price performance of computation. It turns out that's happening now in a dozen technologies. Computation has infected gene sequencing, AI, biotechnology, drones, autonomous cars, neuroscience, et cetera, et cetera. For example, in neuroscience, the resolution at which we can image the brain is doubling every year. Okay, solar energy is doubling every 22 months, roughly every 2 years in its price performance, and has been doing that for 40 years. And it turns out in the next 8 years, we'll be able to deliver, for 4 doublings away, we'll be able to deliver all of our energy needs globally with solar. Okay, you won't see that in the news anywhere because people are really bad at writing those hypotheses. So point one is we have a dozen technologies operating on this exponential basis. Okay, so if you layer a solution on top of drones, and drones are doubling every 9 months in their capability, your solution scales, right? So that's cool. But the second thing is more important and more powerful, which is throughout human history, it's always been true that advanced technologies cost a lot. And only a government or a big corporate lab could do R&D, launch new products and services. Today, for the first time in human history, advanced technologies are cheap. Sensors are cheap, solar energy is cheap, blockchains are open source and free, right? You can spend $20 a month on AI or $1 million a month on AI, you're getting basically the same outcome. So today, it's enabling what I call PDI, permissionless disruptive innovation. So today, any young person can enter a legacy domain with a beginner's mind, leverage new technologies, and totally disrupt it, right? Take Vitalik Buterin, 18-year-old kid gets together with a few friends, ignore the professors, and boom, you have a $600 billion ecosystem that nobody understands. Certainly, I do not fully understand Ethereum. But the observation about that they could do that is unbelievable. And so that's never been possible in human history.
So you talked before about how massive organizations, the immune system will come in for any sort of innovative change. Is that not even worse at, say, a government level? And
oh yeah,
will the power structures let this happen, for one? And two, can they stop it? And then three, if they let it go through, would they let it go through in a way that's actually advantageous to the public? I find that kind of hard to believe and stomach.
Okay. Yes to all of those. Okay. It's going to happen. Why? Because they can't stop it. They can slow it down. So they're slowing down crypto by taxing every transaction as property transfer, right? Even if I change from Ethereum to Bitcoin after, it's a taxable event. So they're slowing it down as much as possible to try and understand it, but they can't stop it, because once you understand the Byzantine generals problem, you're kind of off to the races, and you can't undo that. And if you want, I can.
What is that? Yeah, please.
Oh, okay. So the Byzantine generals problem is the absolute core innovation at the heart of blockchains. Okay. And it's actually the story of Constantinople in the 15th century. There were 8 generals circling the city. They're trying to coordinate a siege. Okay. So they're sending messages around that little network. Who's going to go first? How we're going to get in? What time we're going to go? Et cetera, et cetera. And the problem they had was that 1 out of the 8 generals was a traitor. Okay. Could send the wrong information around, lose the element of surprise, blow the whole operation. Okay. And that's become known as the Byzantine generals problem. In computer science terms, the problem is, how do you send a trusted, secure, authenticated message over a network when you don't trust the network? Okay, that's the and for 40 years, computer science PhDs have been trying to crack that problem unsuccessfully until the blockchain. And on a blockchain, because of the distributed ledger capability and the encryption binding one transaction to the previous one in the stack, those 2 innovations allow you to solve the Byzantine generals problem, so that when I send you an Ethereum, you have a 100% guarantee that it came from me, couldn't be double entered, can't be revoked, which is kind of a magical thing in a digital world. Now, once you have that innovation, you can't unsee it. So now, anywhere where you have a top-down authentication, like retail banks or a central ledger where we trust our life savings to their security, that ledger, knowing I deposited $1,000, they lent it to Keith over there, and we trust a lot of money to the retail banks. Well, with DeFi, retail banking dissolves.
Do you think that'll, but don't they have enough pull with legislation and all these things to keep that alive?
If they could, they would have killed off Bitcoin way early on.
So we've talked. Who do you think made Bitcoin? I want to ask you this: who do you think created Bitcoin?
I think very cleverly, about 3 or 4 key people at the core of cryptography and digital cash came up with Bitcoin. Current thinking, it was most likely that fellow that passed away, can't remember his name, um, because the wording and as the use of language seems to match Satoshi's the most. Um, uh, but very cleverly, they left it anonymous, because if you label it, thus the governments are going to come after you.
So do you think that the government had any involvement in it? Because there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there that it was created by a government entity.
No.
And why do you base that on?
Because it's too damn elegant for governments to have created that.
Really?
Yeah, but the Bitcoin white paper is just amazing.
It is.
And you have no idea whether it's going to be propagated or not. It was in response to the 2008 financial crisis, when the banks were not punished for extending the lending capacity and doing all those stupid mortgages that kind of pretty much destroyed the global economy. And people got pissed off at that. You can see over the decades multiple attempts at digital cash.
Yes.
Okay. So we read the Bitcoin paper in 2009 when it came out. We were giving out Bitcoin for the first few years at Singularity University because we thought it was. But even then, we were waiting for a little while because we didn't think it might take off, because this DigiCash and e-gold, digital gold, all these types of efforts have been made for years and years, and not one of them had really taken off. Okay, but the gamification built into the mining structure had Bitcoin take off. Okay, it's like many people have tried versions of Uber in the past, but it never worked because you didn't have the combination of location services, payment systems, privacy, texting, all at the same time to be able to make it all work with a good user experience. Okay, Bitcoin finally cracked that model. Then Coinbase made it easy to buy, okay? And then that took off. Okay, I do a lot of work with. Have you guys talked to Michael Janssen?
Not yet.
You should talk to Michael. He's one of the mavens in the NFT world. So I learned everything about NFTs and a lot of crypto from him. You try and buy an NFT, it's like jumping through 45 hoops.
It's a nightmare currently.
Especially if you have to go across the AVAX network to the Ethereum network to the Arbitrum network, et cetera, et cetera. But what it does do, everybody in the crypto world by definition is a free thinker, because you have to step outside the structures of the fiat world to be able to do it. Okay. And I don't know if you've talked to Jeff Booth yet.
No, he's one of our guests we're going after too. But
oh my God, yeah. Can I just throw out the statistic that I use?
Please.
So Jeff wrote a book called The Price of Tomorrow, which all of you should just go read. In the book, he goes and interviews the Ray Dalio, Larry Fink, and all these things, and comes up with a really simple observation, which shows you why fiat currencies are going to fail. And the reason is that for the last 50 years, every dollar increase in GDP has come with a $4 increase in global debt. Okay, I'm going to repeat that because it's nuts.
Yeah, you really got it.
Every dollar increase in global GDP is coming because we're creating a $4 debt down the line. So we're taxing the future for $4 for each dollar increase in GDP. Go to a bank and say, please lend me $1 million and I'll return you $250K, and watch how quickly you get shown the door. Right? But we're growing the global economy that way. And why? When we floated off the gold standard in the 70s, we did not realize that technology was deflationary. Okay? And the macro analogy I use for this is, let's say I borrow $10 million to build a TV factory, and I plan to sell those TVs for $1,000 each, and that's going to make my numbers and pay back the loan over a period of time. Great, right? Except because technology is deflationary, that $1,000 TV a year later can only be sold for $500. A year later, it can only be sold for $250. I'm never paying back the $10 million. So what do you do? We print more money to make up for that, which is why we keep printing more and more money. The only tool left to central banks today is to print more money, which obviously then dilutes the hell out of it, which is why Bitcoin is growing up, which is why land prices are going up, which is why the stock market is at an all-time high. It's not underlying productivity increase. It's the fact we're deflating the dollar. We're deflating all our existing currencies. So do not be in cash, be in assets, whatever asset that means, land, stocks, crypto, whatever. Because the dollar is deflating right now. I think the number was 14% a year.
Dang.
So if you're in money market funds that's earning 5% a year, you're losing 10% a year just by sitting there. Okay, so you have to make minimum 14% a year to make the numbers work. So this is a structural problem that is going to have an implosion effect on the global economy. The question, of course, is when does that happen? And I've asked Jeff that exact question. And he's like, I don't know. It depends what snowflake causes the avalanche. We know the avalanche is coming. It's snowing. We don't know which snowflake is going to cause it all to start go.
If
but
you
at
had to
some point,
guess,
it's going to go.
if you had to guess a time frame, what would you say?
2 years. The
2
reason I say
years.
that is that Jeff posited in his book that either a pandemic or crypto would burst that bubble. Okay, neither did. The pandemic we were able to control pretty well. We did actually a really good job of controlling the pandemic. The vaccines did an amazing job, regardless of what everybody complains about. But the and crypto, the governments have kind of managed to slow it down enough to think. But once you had ETFs, it's an escape hatch for the traditional fiat system to go into crypto, and there's no coming back from that. Pure greed, and that's one piece of it. I think AI causes so much disruption that it bursts that bubble because technology, AI will now make everything dirt cheap instantly. It'll make drugs cheap. It'll make education be free. So you have massive chunks of the economy that go to near zero in terms of cost, and so this is the tragedy of using GDP. I can't remember the name, but the guy who invented GDP actually said this is the worst way of measuring an economy. Because let's say I create a mechanism that saves breast cancer, cures breast cancer. Okay, we're spending $500,000 per breast cancer patient on average. GDP goes down. Even though I've solved a major problem, GDP goes down because I'm spending less, right? That's the problem. And so we have some very big structural problems with the existing system. And because we live in a short-term, high metabolism democracy, nobody's looking at the structural long-term changes needed to solve these problems. And therefore, they're going to implode.
Keith, looked like you had some questions.
Yeah. So
Keith's got like 20 questions.
Yeah.
I can see his brain is like, oh my God. Okay, go.
It'll be very, very simple stuff. So I want to tap back in on this permissionless disruptive innovation that you pointed out. I love that term. Very cool. I'm going to highlight one of the comments that we got from Moore. So two things. One of them is, I just wanted to really tap back on this government. Did the government have anything to do with this Bitcoin thing? So Moore said, I disagree. I think Edward Snowden worked as a government contractor, and I see a network of capable government professionals or contractors who can organize a system. Even David Schwartz worked for the NSA in the late 80s. Do you know who David Schwartz is, by the way?
No.
And then quick question. Did you ever meet Brad Garlinghouse at Yahoo?
Yeah, sure.
Were you guys?
Yeah, Brad and I worked alongside each other at Yahoo. He knows very much who I am.
Okay, very cool, very cool.
So, do you know the name Ralph Merkle?
Merkle trees.
Yeah. So Ralph is actually one of the godfathers of nanotechnology, and he teaches at Singularity University. And at one point, somebody goes, "Are you Ralph Merkle from Merkle Hash Trees?" And he's like, "Yeah, that was me back in the 80s." Right. And we're like, what the frick? So that's the basis of the one-way encryption. That's the basis of crypto wallets and Bitcoin. And so we're like, holy crap, Ralph, what the hell? What were you doing? He's like, yeah, I knew that would be important someday. We just didn't know when it would be important, and boom, boom, like 30 years later, it becomes important. So when you talk to these folks, what I see is like these guys may have worked for the government at different times and learned some fundamental systemic things, but it's not the government doing it. It's often like the anarchists in the government going, we need a whole new system. Let's go build this thing.
So Booth says that a lot too. Yeah, Jeff says that too. Basically the same sort of thesis.
But why can't I, if I'm recognizing that there's a need for a solution, why can't I hire the smartest people in the world to go out and solve that problem with the intention that this is the thing that I'm actually trying to build out? But they don't know that. You mean
Bitcoin specifically, for example?
As an example.
You could. The problem is that a government has a single high order bit of self-preservation. Okay, and the fiat currency system is if you move to Bitcoin as the means of measure of unit, right? a unit of account, you basically de-dollarize the world. The minute you de-dollarize the world, the US dollar implodes.
If I'm a
and
government,
the US economy collapses.
if
So
I'm a government,
if anybody did it, was not the US government, in my opinion.
if I'm any government, I'm going to recognize the inevitability of the collapse of any fiat system. And so I'm
Yes.
going to try to find a way to get out ahead of it, in my eyes, right?
Yeah, but so then what you would see then is Satoshi would be a government entity, right? And what I would suggest to you there is you're assuming a level of capability of government that I've never seen. Okay, the ability to keep a secret, for example. Okay, this is why like all the moon landing guys are like full of crap, because 400,000 people keeping a secret when the Russians have every motivation, if they could prove it's a fake, they would absolutely get it out there that it's a hoax, right? So that tells you right there that the moon landing was not a hoax. Also, the fact that moon landing orbiters or moon orbiters can see the sites and the footprints on the sand and all that stuff. Okay, so that's how. But if you were a government, you'd have to be an incredibly high functioning government to do it. And it would be not the US government, because it's counter the US government's interest to do this, because they don't want to lose control with the US dollar. Okay. And there's no mechanism to control Bitcoin. If it was not open source, I could start to believe that maybe it was. But the whole thing's freaking open source, and anybody can take the original Bitcoin paper and go create a mining node and implement the software with a couple of minor changes, and you're off to the races. To open it up like that is an act of selfless courage that no government I've ever seen has.
So this leads perfectly into the second part of the question that I wanted to ask. And this relates to AI, I think, as well, in the terms of, so the government can't control the source code.
Yeah.
But private entities potentially can, and what we're seeing, gain control of the supply of the asset itself.
You mean like ETFs buying up all the Bitcoin?
ETFs buying up all the Bitcoin.
Okay. Yeah.
Does that not create a potential incentive structure that, the word that I want to use, that inverts or makes bad use of the original idea or the concept of what Bitcoin is trying to accomplish? And like, do you think that if that happens, if BlackRock ends up owning all the Bitcoin, does that create an issue for the world of using Bitcoin to actually solve this whole
so about somewhere around 2012 or 2013, one of the big Bitcoin miners out of China actually gained 50.1% control of all the Bitcoin. Okay. And so what happens in that case is an interesting problem. Okay.
And when you say that, you mean the mining power, correct?
No, they actually got control of the hash rate. And so they had an attack vector where they could have totally changed Bitcoin.
Gotcha.
Okay? They had full control of changing Bitcoin. Okay.
Right.
Okay. They had a Hobson's choice at that point. Ooh, we have all this power. Okay. But if we utilize this power, Bitcoin goes to zero, because everybody will lose trust in the system. And they gave it back because the system only works when nobody has majority control of it.
Otherwise, it's worthless.
Otherwise, it's worthless. Now, what happens if everybody goes to that? Let's say there's a concerted purchase effort. If I was the U.S. government, if I wanted to destroy Bitcoin, I would just I would just create enough US dollars to go buy all the Bitcoin, get 60% of the Bitcoin and just shut it down. You could do that. Okay. But every 6 months that goes by, it becomes kind of exponentially harder to do that. They would have done that years ago when it was $5 a Bitcoin. Okay. Because then for 100 million bucks, you could buy all the Bitcoin. But at 100,000, it starts to get more and more expensive, and it becomes increasingly harder. So the fact that they have not done that until now, and you look at China tried to ban Bitcoin, India tried to ban Bitcoin, they all failed. Okay, because the system is gamed in such a brilliant and elegant way that it actually sits outside the control of anybody. So the fact that it's open source, the fact that no government can control it, if they could have done it, they would have done it early. And there's no shortage of government smarts, but the ability to act and take it down would have been, you would have seen much more efforts in that. Right now, I don't know how many, what the actual ownership of Bitcoin and the ETFs are, but it's not that high, right? It's not tens of percents. I think it's in the single digit percentage range. I think it'll stay that way, especially as Bitcoin becomes more and more expensive.
So you basically said that the system collapsing as we know it in terms of the fiat-based money system is an inevitability.
Yes.
When that happens, how does life change for the everyday person?
Unclear. That's what we call a singularity, because it's hard to predict past that event horizon. So you don't know what the world is going to look like at that point. What you'll see is radical hyperinflation, right? Because everything will start suddenly cost 5 times more. And the governments will start printing a truck ton of money because it's the only thing governments are able to do. That'll drive it even further. And basically people go, you know what? Let's use Ethereum or Cardano or Bitcoin as a means of exchange. And rather than US dollars, which are changing, like not by accident, are Argentina and Venezuela the most active Bitcoin countries in the world over the last 10 years because their currencies are the most crazy over the last 10 years, right? So as we lose control of the currency to inflation and deflation because of money printing, people will naturally move more and more. Now, I would have thought this would be a much bigger change, except when I work with Michael Janssen and I sit in all these Discord channels with all these NFT kids, right? The one thing that blew my mind, you have an entire culture evolving in the crypto and NFT world where the word US dollar is never, ever, 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 ever mentioned. An NFT is worth this many ETH or this many Bitcoin or an ordinal or whatever. You don't hear the word US dollar. The exchange rate is meaningless. That's a pretty profound thing to say in that sense. So it's a very, the switching the unit of account, for them, the unit of account is Ethereum, not the US dollar. For several generations now, maybe 200 years, the only medium of exchange and the only unit of account for any single person in the world, certainly in the US, was the US dollar. Right. So now you're seeing this entire subculture evolving where they don't care. And so it won't be hard for them to switch.
No.
They'll just start passing. I'll give you another crazy example. In the 1970s in Ireland, there was a banking strike. The central bank went on strike. Nobody could clear checks. And so like the Irish do, they just started passing checks around and said, well, when the central bank and clearing system comes online, we'll just settle it all up. So they just operated on an honor system. 2 years went by and the central bank realized, shit, nobody even notices we're on strike anymore. Better come back, otherwise we're going to not be in existence going forward. So they canceled the strike and then they settled it all up and off they went. And a few people had written bad checks, but for the most part, society worked perfectly well. Okay, I think that's the kind of thing that we're going to see where we'll move to a different model and it'll be fairly elegant. The only biggest issue is because one of the things that was the most profound thing, we had a 2-hour conversation with Jeff Booth and our entire EXO community a couple of years ago. One of the things that blew my mind was that if the internet goes down, Bitcoin still works. That's kind of a really profound comment.
Can you explain to people why that would be the case?
Yeah, because encryption is still there. Okay. I mean, I could give you 0.2 of a Bitcoin on a piece of paper and give it to you, and you could take it in. Okay. The only thing that can't happen is the ledgers can't sync up, but we can still do Bitcoin transactions. My Bitcoin wallet doesn't disappear. So the internet may go down for a while, but Bitcoin still works. Okay. Once you get to that level of kind of realization, you're like, well, hell, nothing is taking this thing down. The resiliency that's built in is pretty profound. Now, the network effects of a lot of people using it basically make it a pretty safe bet.
Keith, looks like you got something deep there.
If the ledger's not updating, then if the network's not syncing up, then is the value of the Bitcoin there anymore?
You'd have to drop the entire network for a very long, sustained period of time to break it. And I suggest that if you did that, if you got to that point, many other bigger things would be
Have
broken
happened.
way before
Pretty
way before people were worrying about Bitcoin.
That's
right?
totally fair. Do you think we see universal basic income?
I really hope so. The reason I say that is we've tracked this pretty carefully. We've looked at 14 major experiments of UBI, and when you do it properly, it's been profoundly successful. Okay, the problem is that to move from a union taxation job labor economy to that is such a big leap. We have no confidence in our governments in doing it. Do you know about the Manitoba experiment?
No.
In the 70s in Manitoba, they tried out a UBI. Okay, ran it for 2 years. And at the end of 2 years, they were like, wow, this is so successful, nobody even needs the government. Okay, and they canceled the program.
It worked
because
too well.
government wants to be needed.
So, yes,
and
that's the whole thing.
That's the immune system in the government. Okay, so now this becomes an act of really people voting for it or moving to it. And I think what's going to happen is as we move through AI and as we move through de-dollarization over a period of time, we're naturally going to move to a UBI type system.
Keith,
we'll have to. It's just an ugly transition that I think the current structure breaks in the next 2-3 years. It'll be about 2-3 years of fairly messy chaos, and then it'll be 2-3 years to rebuild and move to whatever the system we decide is going to be the one. And now we'll move the world from scarcity-based systems to abundance-based systems.
As that happens, where do you plan on being in the world?
Don't care. I don't have big needs. We have a house just outside Manhattan, perfectly happy being here. We were in Florida for several years. We actually ran a bunch of calculations at Singularity University. We got the raw data off Mauna Kea in Hawaii off the observatory and looked at the carbon readings like from first data principles to look at climate change. And it was the worst exponential you've ever seen like this. And we ran a bunch of calculations and talked to a bunch of climate change gurus. And it turned out there's about 7 really regions of the world that are deeply a threat. Bangladesh, Florida, the Washington, D.C. River Delta, et cetera, et cetera. And so we worked out that in about 20 or 25 years, Miami's likely gone.
Wow.
Yeah. So I moved there, figuring I might as well go enjoy it while I was there before because the seawater is rising a half an inch a year in Miami, okay? A centimeter a year. And from Boca Raton south, the average sea level is 18 inches over sea level, average altitude. So the bottom third of Florida is toast.
Wow.
And it's not so much the sea level rise, but that extra layer in the Gulf is really, really hot and generating a ton more extreme weather events.
I stay in Jacksonville. Do you think that'll be safe?
Jacksonville's fine, bro.
Cool.
Yeah. On the UBI thing, do you think that comes from the private sector or the public sector?
I think private sector first, and then public sector to adopt it at scale. And the reason is that public sector doesn't want to know about UBI. In the Trump administration is actually making it illegal for states to experiment on UBI structures.
Wow.
Oh,
Just think about that for a second. They're making it illegal to run UBI experiments.
Crazy.
What in God's name is that all about? I don't know if it's restricted, whether I was under Biden also, but definitely under Trump. That's just weird as hell for me.
I've got to ask a question that I think a lot of people listening would love to hear your opinion on. The fact that you know about Brad Garlinghouse, all right, I have to ask you the question. What do you think of the company Ripple and what it is that they're trying to accomplish?
So you got to give full kudos to the grand ambition of Ripple. They're setting out to build a completely next-gen financial settlement system and transition past Wall Street and stock market trades and move to a totally new settlement engine. And they want to be that settlement engine. And they've got as good a shot as anybody at getting there. And the success of Ripple has been absolutely, you look at the last year or so, right? It's kind of incredible the way it's just exploded. The transition is going to take time. I have the similar type of respect for Jeremy Allaire at Circle, right? Just steadily just went about it. So we're always going to have 100% transparent backing for any USDC, which gives the market a lot of trust. Tether a little dodgier, but getting better now quickly, right? Those structures where you've got a long-term play, all you have to do is never lose the long-term vision and just keep executing against that vision, and you can't not succeed if you just can last long enough. And the early success of Ripple gave them enough currency and boosting power to have them coast for as long as they need to get to become successful. I don't see how you displace it easily.
Got it. Chat. Well, before we let Salim go, if you have any questions, ask them now, and we'll do our best to ask Salim a few before we wrap up here. Keith, what do you have?
Yeah. The questions, I really just wanted to respond to Chad saying, how would the private sector even do UBI?
We actually did this. We had a client. So when I mentioned the sprint that we do, this 10-week engagement, we piloted it with Procter & Gamble. Then we did it with the largest insurance company in Mexico. And they found they wanted to reduce the labor force. And what they did was they basically said to all the 1,000 people or so they wanted to lay off, we're going to give you 2 years of UBI and gives you that runway to go find your next gig and go learn something that you're passionate about and go do whatever you want for a couple of years. And then if you, at the end of that, haven't found a job, then we'll try and hire you back. Or because they're a family-owned business, they really valued the loyalty and the fact of that. So they basically gave everybody in the company, I think it was like a 2-year UBI, and said, here's a minimum amount. The trick behind UBI is to find the level that people can survive but not be happy. Okay, so then you still have a thriving economy. People go out and get jobs, but they're not worried about the bottom 2 layers of Maslow's hierarchy.
Got it.
In Europe, when they do UBIs, they often try and give too much or make them dependent on governments, in which case it's not unlimited. So you have to succeed on universal, you have to succeed on basic, and you have to succeed on income. If you do all those 3, it turns out to be staggeringly successful. And it works incredibly well. Then you can dismantle a lot of government services, which tend to be inefficient and don't react as quickly as market structures react.
But wouldn't they fight that?
Governments fight like hell. That's why Manitoba canceled the very, very, very successful UBI system.
So what can we do as people to help push that forward?
Vote in Jerry Yang, who wanted to do this, and
Andrew Yang.
Andrew Yang.
Yeah.
Who, by the way, I interviewed Andrew for an event once. We recorded this long, brilliant 25-minute interview. At the end of it, Andrew, I'm so sorry I forgot to hit record.
No.
We have to start again. And he was so gracious. He goes, okay, we'll do it again. We'll try better the second time.
Wow.
It was bad. Anyway, you have people like Andrew Yang who've seen this early. It'll build over time, and at some point it'll become inevitable. Will people say, just shut up and do this and move to this structure?
What scares you the most about AI, you personally?
Very little. I mean, compared to the excitement I have of what we're going to be able to achieve with it, my degrees in theoretical physics, the idea that we could solve the grand unification theory is just totally profound for me.
So what is the grand unification theory, and how would we theoretically solve it?
Grand unification theory is trying to merge Einstein's relativity with quantum mechanics. The problem with quantum mechanics is it works, but we have no idea why it works.
Yes.
And it drives people crazy. This is the whole comment of God does not play dice with the world type of stuff. I'll give you my best macro explanation of quantum mechanics. You can add up all the gates and planes and tickets for Pearson Airport, right? Or Heathrow Airport. And you can say 3 million people are going to go through Heathrow Airport this year. And you can achieve with great accuracy that 3 million will go through this year, okay? You can achieve with zero accuracy at all which 3 million people it'll be. Like, will this grandmother living in the side of, next to Heathrow go through Heathrow this year? Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. but you know that 3 million people are going to go through.
Mhm.
And that's how quantum mechanics, it works at the mass scale, but at the individual electron level, you don't know what an electron's going to do. But goddamn, it's accurate at the mass scale.
Totally.
And this drives people crazy, but it works. I've got a final thing about quantum computers, which you may have heard me talk about on the podcast.
Yes, please. We actually had a question earlier that I forgot to throw on the screen. Yeah, please.
Okay. Everybody needs to take a drink at the end of this one. Okay. But basically, we had Steve Jurvetson, who's invested in D-Wave, SpaceX, Tesla, etc. He came into the talk 10 years ago at Singularity University on quantum computing. And during the Q&A, we asked him a question. The question was, quantum computing seems to be able to do this unimaginable amount of computation. Where is all this computation coming from? And he goes, there is a consensus answer between all the physicists, and I can tell you that answer, but you're not going to like it. We're like, what do you mean? Just freaking tell it. What do you mean we're not going to like it? He's like, all right. It seems that the consensus from all the physicists is that we're doing the computation in parallel universes and bringing the answer back. Okay. And we're like, fuck right off. Right. And he's like, I told you wouldn't like it. Okay. So that was 10 years ago. Okay. A year ago, we had the head of a guy called Hartmut Nevin, who's the head of Google's quantum computing lab, come and do a talk at XPRIZE. So he does a little talk, and during the Q&A, I said, listen, I have a question. 10 years ago, Steve Jurvetson said this. Okay, we now have 10 years of people building quantum computers, hundreds more teams working at it, much more applications in the area, et cetera, et cetera. What's the current consensus thinking on where is all this computation coming from? And he goes, I'll tell you the answer, but you're not going to like it. You're like, you're kidding. And his answer was exactly the same. In fact, he goes, I'll even go further. He goes, when we build a quantum computer, it'll be proof that we live in, it will be definitive proof that we live in a multiverse.
Wow.
So at which point your brain just explodes and you just got to go have a this is why we need psychedelics, right? I mean, like what the hell is that? So like how surreal and amazing is the world to have shit like that happen?
The part I struggle with grasping is that I'm okay with that from a concept point of view, but application, like, are there computers in these different multiverses that are like interfacing back and forth to give us the output?
That's past my pay grade.
Okay.
I'm a hack physicist, but my understanding is yes. Now, the other question I've got is, if we're stealing all this computation from those parallel universes, aren't they going to be pissed when we find out that we're using up all their resources to do all this computation and taking the answer back to our universe, right? How is that going to work? The philosophical and broader implications of this are ridiculous. In fact, I was sitting at the last XPRIZE event with a guy, and I said, oh, what do you do? He goes, I build quantum computers. And I'm like, what? 20 years he's been building quantum computers. So I said, okay, can you ratify what these guys said? He goes, yeah, 100% right. He goes, in fact, when we run a quantum computer, we actually use the verbology that, oh, I just created 20 different parallel universes by running that operation. And your brain cannot process that. They actually use that terminology now already. So
that's crazy.
It's totally nuts. I don't know where even to start with trying to process it. Maybe a good place to end this conversation.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's probably a natural place. The only other thing that I wanted to ask you about was something that you guys talk a lot about in the pod in terms of robotics. And how far away do you think we are from robotics taking blue collar work?
Depends on the blue collar work. If you're stamping out widgets on an assembly line, you're already toast.
Yeah, you're cooked.
You're already automated. Okay. If you're a plumber having to move a washing machine in a resident's house to fix the leaking water line behind, and you have to navigate 15 different things and figure out how to, it's going to take way, 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 way longer than that, just because the adaptive intelligence of manipulating physical objects in physical spaces that you've not seen before is something that will not be automated anytime soon, right? Like you have to notice that, oh, this is a plastic end, so I have to handle it with a little more delicacy, and I can only get my fingers in. There's a million things you have to think about, and we do. Just think about driving. When I'm driving down the road and I have to pass a biker and then I have to move extra further because I have to pass a biker who's passing a biker, and then there's a pothole I'm trying to avoid.
So many variables.
Simple little thing, but a kind of a autonomous car can't deal with that. My Tesla can't deal with that, right?
Totally.
So that's just driving, which is a very bounded domain. Okay, forget the millions of little things that we can't. This is why I complained to Peter. We can't even get the Roomba to work. Right?
I have one. I can attest to that.
You have to spend all your time moving
everything.
for the Roomba. By that time, you might as well have done it yourself. So first, show me a Roomba that works properly, fully, and then we'll start talking about some of these other more interesting areas. We have no idea how, but the act of physically moving things in spaces turns out to be very, very difficult problem. So building a custom-built home, for example, is something that's going to be difficult to automate. Laying solar panels on a roof will not be easy. You can do prefab, but trying to do it on that roof, having to navigate that thing, fighting off those squirrels whose nest you just disturbed, all of the millions of little things that we don't even notice that we take into account when we're doing stuff will come into play in these edge cases. The best example I have is what's called what's the proprioception. Okay, so if you close your eyes and you touch your finger to your nose, the sense of where my finger is in three-dimensional space, I have an incredibly innate sense of that. Okay, a robot does not have proprioception, so it has to have external sensors to go, your finger's off by 2 centimeters, bring it down, etc., etc. Just that little kind of nugget gives you a glimpse of how difficult this is, because we don't even notice we have proprioception to start thinking about how you'd automate that in a robot, right? Completely. Now they're getting better, and the new Android humanoid robots are pretty incredible, but when they're doing specific things like mix me a gin and tonic, fine, right? If you say go tidy up the bedroom, that may be a much harder task, because now you need to have some sense of what do you mean by tidy, right? And then hopefully it doesn't mistake my I have a little cute, one of these dogs that looks like a stuffed bear, okay? Literally. Now, if it picked up that dog thinking it's a stuffed bear and chucks it in the washing machine, that's going to be a problem. Right? And how are we going to deal with that? So I think there's a lot more things that we haven't thought about. Then you've got all the liability insurance issues that come along with it. And I don't know how we're going to deal with that. So I don't know where we are. I can certainly see robots for industrial uses and DDD, what are called dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs. Yeah. Mining, cleaning up toxic oil spills, all sorts of stuff. But just think about the complexity of just taking your dog for a walk.
Yeah, there's so many things.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Salim, I want to thank you for coming on Memes and Markets. It was an absolute pleasure. You definitely made our brains explode, and I'm sure that the people in the chat...
You know now why I'm bald, right? Because all the hair is burned off the top.
I think I'm close to getting there after this conversation. Yeah, but thank you so much. Keith, did you have anything else for Salim before we wrap up?
No, I just wanted to say thanks again. I think this has been really cool, man.
Great to be here. Great questions. Great conversation.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you on again in the future, Salim, and I'll keep watching everything you guys say on Moonshots, and thank you so much for your time here.
If you understand any of it, let me know.
Yeah.
So trying to keep up with some of those concepts is kind of mind-boggling for me.
It's definitely some mental workouts every single week, but it's a lot of fun all the same.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Salim.
Great to be with you guys.
Bye-bye. Keith, you want to stay on for a bit and chop it up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
It says I'm 99%.
I think you're good to leave. If not, I'll send you a link after.
Okay.
Thank you, Salim.
All right. Take care, guys. Great conversation.
Thanks, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you so
much. Enjoy Bangkok. I'm jealous.
Oh, man. I will do my best.
All right. Take care.
Bye, Salim.
All right, now.
Thank you.
Thanks, dude.
So, Keith. All right.
Yeah.
We open up to the chat some more. I don't know why I'm small and you're big.
I think it fixed on my screen at least.
Okay, cool. Chat, do y'all have anything that you wanted to chop it up on before we wrap up? Just want to let Salim get out of there because we already kept him longer than we were supposed to.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, this is cool. We get to have like a little
debrief.
Yeah.
So don't be shy.
Thanks, Chad.
Thank you, Chad. Appreciate you. We'll throw you up on the screen.
RD as well.
RD, appreciate you for showing up always. But I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on everything that Salim shared. Where do you agree? Where do you disagree? What questions came up after hearing everything he had to share? Because one of the most interesting things about him is that he really does have specific knowledge at the intersection of a lot of these technologies, and really, really cool work experience. And then also with the show on Moonshots, like they talk to the people building all the craziest stuff every single week,
Yep.
which is crazy.
Yep. Very high level conversations over there. I got to listen to quite a bit of it over the past few days, and it's going to be good for us to have the AI experts come in and chat. That's what I'll say on that. So many different things regarding energy, the actual labor market itself, how that's going to affect the rest of the economy. And then you start getting into we almost started off with some of the more like esoteric kind of things of like, what is consciousness? And are we going to be uploading that? Or like, what is happening? Oh, one question I forgot to ask was around, they talk about longevity and biohacking and things of that nature, and how pretty much we're at the point where in the next 10 years, you're going to be able to choose whether or not you want to live forever.
Yeah.
Right. Is that going to be something that we want to do? How much is that going to cost? You know?
Kevin says, I came into this live late, but I'm curious of your overall objective as it relates to the conversation and understanding of AI. I wouldn't really say that I have an objective more so than trying to best equip myself and then anybody who wants to watch and listen with the same. How about yourself, Keith?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, Kevin, great question. And thank you for being here, my man. Shout out to you and everything that you do. The goal is to also talk a little bit about what we can do about it. Right? Like, as the individual, we got a very clear answer: be an entrepreneur. And Kevin, you go out into the world and you literally do that for people. You also tell them and teach them exactly how to do it, which is very cool. So, you know, that was what I took away from this, was like, go be an entrepreneur. Everybody.
I also, yeah, I think it's also really important because like we don't have the prestige or cachet of people like Salim, right? And so when they come on and say the same things we're saying, that also validates that we're close to the target. You know what I mean? I think that's also really, really impactful. And then also, I also want to try to play the role of like, what are the questions that they don't get asked because they're so far removed from the everyday person, right? Like all those people, they try their best to think like you or me, but their life is so not similar to our existence, right? So it's an impossible task to think about every sector of people. And so I tried to play that role of like, okay, so when this came up, what would this person be thinking? What would they wish they could ask, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that those are the things too. It's like there's so much information out there right now. And there's people like Greg Eisenberg, who we've already talked about on the pod, who go out there and really give you that practical advice. So it's like what I see us doing here is like continuing to give like the high level thinking around like what is actually occurring, and then some of the tactics, or at least the general thinking around how to go and find the Greg Eisenbergs, right? Like trying to point people in the direction. And
Yeah,
like you're saying, having the unique conversation.
Roderick has a great point here. That's if he is correct, of course. Yeah, we could be totally off base. We could be totally wrong. But I think our job is to share the opinion that we think is right, and then let you decide with it what you do, right? Like that's completely up to you. But
and to challenge.
yes,
You know, I tried to challenge him a bit, you know, on some of the things he was saying, for sure.
yeah, and I think also where we come into this whole equation of discussing AI, tech, et cetera, is that I think that our existence is a lot more similar than the people watching this content for the most part, then, right? And I think that does play a big role in terms of its efficacy, in terms of how do you directly apply what you've learned to a realistic scenario, because a lot of the examples that they give would make sense for them and their peers, but they have a massive network, they have a lot of money, they have connections, and they have been there and done that, right? Where the average person who's really going to be impacted by this has worked the same job for the last 10 to 20 years. They did this, and it's very different.
Yeah. Kevin, do either of you use AI to generate revenue? I mean, to generate revenue, I feel like it's hard to say it exactly in that way, but I mean, yeah,
Totally
to
you do.
produce my marketing messages,
Yeah.
to produce everything I produce, AI is usually involved to some degree.
Yeah, Kevin, I would say I've always been an idea guy my entire life, and I always knew stuff would work, but I didn't have the bandwidth or the money to go do multiple of them at the same time the right way. Now you can. So like now they always say, I think Sam Altman said, or someone said it, it's the era of the idea guy, which is like, for me, I was like, wow, I was born in the perfect time, because I've always had ideas where I've later, 10 years later, seen it become a successful business that I could have done, but I didn't have the time or the resources. And most of those time or resources were really just due to dumb shit, bureaucracy, and things that you had to get right, or otherwise you couldn't get going. And a lot of that has the cost has come down quite dramatically. So Kevin asks a question here. Been there, done that. So now my question for you is, where are you and where do you want to be? Kevin's got some great questions today. So my my ultimate goal has not changed since I've been a very little kid. I want to tackle problems that I want to tackle with the people that I want to work with, and just to never stop doing that, to be honest. And then and learn endlessly is really my objective. Keith, what would you say your objective is?
I mean, um, my overall objective is to be a conduit, right? To, I guess, people living a better life. I know that's
Mhm.
not necessarily what's
No, I
you
would say
asked.
I would
But
say that's really anchored to what I was trying to say too. Like I want to solve those problems so that I can help, because I feel like I have things innately in me that can benefit people. If I don't use them, then I feel like I'm kind of wasting a lot. I think about that all the time. So yeah, it's a really difficult question, Kevin. That's a phenomenal question. I really love when you guys come in here and ask these questions, because realistically, like why we made this show live is because the whole point of this is that like we could just pre-record and then post and stuff like that. But I don't think that gives you near the kind of application ability of what we're talking about, right? And then also you don't get to know the seven layers of why I'm coming to what I'm saying, right? I'm just a figure, I'm a character at that point. But when you can come in here and say, okay, so you think like this, but why? Then that just creates a depth of connection where you can feel what we're saying a lot more.
yeah, 100% on that, dude. Like being able to actually interact, like it's much more like a classroom, like you
Yes.
raise your hand and
Yeah.
you actually can learn
It's what I
in
wish
real time.
school was, you know what I mean, when I was growing up, because I was
Yeah.
always the guy who would wanna go on 4 different paths, and then when I would try to ask a question, they would say, "That's not what we're talking about today, Ben," right? I can't tell you how many times I got that, and, all of my learning skills were always horrible in school for these purposes, right? Like, I would say I would ask why so many times or wanna go in different paths, and I just learned that you gotta sit down, shut up, and I did all my exploration outside of school, which is crazy.
Yeah, dude. Um, it was really cool to hear him kind of go through how the system as it is there is completely done. Uh,
He
and
went
I was, yeah.
Go ahead, you got a
Mhm.
point?
I just the idea that like we've built up so much debt. I think it was him somewhere I was hearing on the podcast. Like we might actually need to forgive the student loan debt in America because
It's
like
irrelevant.
it actually has been
It's useless.
worthless.
It was a scam the whole time, bro. It was a scam the whole time. For the last little bit, of course. Like, obviously, it had efficacy before, but it was also really cool to see that he was in the Waterloo co-op program. That's a crazy connection, because I chose Guelph out of all the schools that I talked to for football and stuff, was because they had the co-op program. It's like actually why I picked them, and they modeled it after Waterloo's. And through that experience, I so quickly saw how screwed up this whole thing was, right? 'Cause I was in the marketing program, and every internship, so this is crazy for people to think about, but like if you've been through school, it's so obvious, right? I'm at the highest point of education for the marketing field, right? I'm going to work in a marketing profession, and I don't have any of the skills they want. What am I paying for?
Right.
I was like, that's when I was like, okay, this thing's broken. I'm gonna do everything I can to just stay in the co-op program, which I had to maintain a 70 average every year. So I did everything I could. I like literally, I remember my first year, I stayed into it, and I came home for Christmas, and my dad looked at my thingy, and I had 70.02 or something like that. Like I barely got the 70. And I was proud of that. I was like, I executed exactly what I wanted. He's like, classic Ben, doing just enough to get by. I was like, if you understood, that's a marvelous achievement. I did the least I've needed to do and put my
Yep.
time into other places. I was very proud of that.
Yeah, that's super cool, man. Yeah, that was funny. You guys were like, "Oh, maybe you did well in school." It's like, no, it was the same exact thing. But at the time, I didn't even care either. It was just like, why am I doing this stuff at all?
Well, I saw the people that
Got
excelled in
lucky.
school, and I was just like, I looked at the people. So, like,
Facts, though.
people would go and say, like, okay, if I look at the people that I looked up to, I just thought through, I'm like, they probably were all really bad at school. Because look what they did. They all did the things when everyone's saying you're stupid, don't do this, like you can't do that, right? And so I really didn't pay attention to most of my classes for one, and then most of the people that were the most into it, I just didn't really connect with philosophically all that well because I was like, what are we doing here? Granted, I should never have gone to school in the first place. I knew from a teenager that I was going to be an entrepreneur. I went there because my dad dropped out of school, so it was like a very big deal. I had to go to school. But
Let's get to some of these comments, because one
yeah.
of the things that Roderick, you've been saying this whole time, and the reason, Roderick, I didn't respond to this idea was because honestly, as it came up, it didn't hit me the way it hit you, Roderick. So I didn't like recognize why this is so important. So if you can, if you're here still, elaborate on this binary world that he mentioned that we live in is wrong, and that is that's fundamental in this discussion. So yeah, that was something that I didn't capture when he said it. So expand on why you think that that's so fundamental to the discussion, and
Yeah. I
what.
saw that a bunch, but I didn't think that I could put it in smoothly, so I didn't touch it, which is why I'm glad we're bringing it up now. So, but as we wait for them to respond, Underdog's got a really good point here that I think Keith and I can say something about. So, just doesn't seem like a realistic possibility for the majority of society to be entrepreneurs, but I do understand the premise. Just honestly seems like the divide is going to grow. It absolutely will grow, but the only reason that you don't think you can be an entrepreneur is because you weren't told to be the whole time. Right? Like, the system is engineered to benefit the existing entrepreneurs, not to create new ones.
And like okay, so I'm here in Bangkok right now, and whenever you go to some of these developing types of countries, and maybe I haven't done the data on this, I'll have to do the data. um, you see so many more small businesses, right,
Mhm.
than you see in your typical in America, for instance. You have these larger conglomerates all the time, but here on every single corner, right, there's a bodega, if you may,
Mhm.
and like tons of them. And these are just moms and granddads and whatever, just running a little shop. And now, whether you want to consider these people entrepreneurs or not, I would.
I would.
And like in some ways, like it actually is potentially more prevalent. And there's just certain societies that we live in that like discourage that risk taking and that like going after it. But I do think it's a highly cultural thing, actually.
Totally. Yes. Yeah. Canada's got the opposite culture where
Mhm.
ambition is a dirty word. Entrepreneurship is not celebrated here whatsoever. And so I actually wanted to build on this. So Underdogs also said some people just want to be regular Joe Schmo. And honestly, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So I would really challenge that. And I think that any entrepreneur can be regular Joe Schmo. It's actually a better form of existence, in my opinion, because you dictate what your workday looks like, right? Most people have a very bad relationship with working because they've had to work with someone under a very strict schedule, doing things they don't actually want to do. Whereas if you're an entrepreneur, you get a lot more choice in all of that. I work all the time because I'm constantly working on things I actually want to work on. Most people who are talking about this, they've never had that in their life, right? Because they went to school, they took classes, and they picked like a major that they either thought would make them money or what they did the best at. And so they went down that route. And then they were never actually doing things they really wanted to do. I also think that people think of entrepreneurship like you have to be Elon Musk. There are so many levels of
Right.
entrepreneurship. You could be like, think about your job right now. You're basically the best employees are mini entrepreneurs within an existing organization. And I do think that that will basically become the evolution of what entrepreneurship will be. You'll just be working for yourself.
Exactly. If you work at a big investment bank, like the managing director, right, is the CEO of that division of the business, and their performance, right, they get paid based upon how well their investments are going, right? And so what could happen in what you're describing in my eyes is like a world where that just continues to trickle down, and where also you're a contractor to the business
Mhm.
that you're working for. But in that, like, you can't get a job anymore based upon just, I'm saying eventually, right, you get to a point to where you don't get a job just based upon your who you are as easily, right? Because now you're competing on a global scale with every single person who has similar skill sets. So now, and the point of me saying this is that like the actionable thing to do is to hone in on solving a problem or having a skill set that aligns with where you want to be and who you want to be. Um, because if you're going to be able to compete, right, or be successful as an entrepreneur, you want to be doing the things that no one can compete with you on, which are the things that you can naturally wake up and just be like, I'm doing this.
I think entrepreneurial thinking. So is at the end of your point, or you got more? So I think like this is actually this kind of perfectly underlines what I was trying to say. So to a degree, a DoorDasher is an entrepreneur, and I would, to a degree, agree with that. I think how you find success in an ever-changing world is entrepreneurial thinking, right? An entrepreneur sees a problem and thinks about how do I solve this the best to get the outcome that I want, right? I think a lot of people are going through the motions, and even in jobs like that, like the DoorDasher who hates his life, it's because like I'm not saying door dashing is like the be all end all, but if you do your job and you hate it and it comes through in all of the stuff that you do, like you can't expect to get really well compensated for it, right? Like the door dashers that go above and beyond, I guarantee you they're earning a lot more than those that aren't.
That's right.
Right. And so if you go ahead, Keith.
Pareto's principle. I bet you 20% of the Uber drivers, Grab drivers are making 80% of all the tips because they're going above and beyond.
Totally. So here's one from John. I believe that humans are meant to create, and that does not happen in a binary way. I would agree with that. But I do think that all of these tech changes can potentially open us up to a new realm of creation, right? Like if you don't have to, because most of the times when we say the whole be an entrepreneur, Keith, they always are like, oh, I don't have the time, or I don't have the money. Both very fair and valid arguments, right? Or it's way too hard. Another thing too is that some people have even tried this before. They tried to be an entrepreneur, but it was so much harder a decade ago. Like so unbelievably harder. And then even before that, it was harder. It was harder. It's harder. It's become a lot easier. Yes. So you need to think outside of the box. Yes. And I think that the people who are the best in this environment have been doing that from the very beginning. That's why I'm very lucky, blessed. Like, I don't think I had any say in this. I've just always been thinking like that. So I have like 29 years of head start. But it doesn't mean that you can't get there quickly when you train your brain to start spotting things. Like, what are weird little things that you do, Keith, that most non-entrepreneurial people don't do? Like, whenever I walk into a space, I always think about how I would make them more money. I think about how their business functions, and I think about where they're losing their money.
One of the most successful people that I had ever been around, that's how they moved. And it was like this, we were 19 at the time. This kid would, like, wherever we went, like he would just see any establishment as an opportunity to like get business. He was in social media. And so like there was a point to where this kid was posted up in a hotel for free.
Yeah.
Had a Mercedes Benz for free. Was like traveling on private jets for free because everywhere he went, he would like see an opportunity to create a business or to find a new customer for his business, right? And he would do an exchange. And the cool thing about that is that like he wasn't even just trying to get money; he was getting paid, but he was also finding a way to create the life that he wanted through the skills that he had too. And like that's another part of entrepreneurship is the deal making, right? Like that's the creativity that a lot of people have, right? In the finance world, especially, like that's where you see it. You see like, okay, but the terms of what's happening can be changed. And this is how, I mean, like think about Spotify, Netflix, right? Like all those companies did was they changed the terms upon which the producers and the demanders of music, television, how they actually came to agreement with one another. So sometimes it's not even like you have to create some crazy technological solution. Sometimes it can be like, you notice that Bob has X and that Alice wants Y, and they're not getting it from one another.
That the empathy muscle is something we talked about so many times, but I wanted to pull up this quote from Naval because I think it's very relevant. So he says, intelligence is a measure of how good you are at getting what you want. So then when you reverse engineer that, there's gatekeepers to any transformation, right? And I think a lot of people, they really don't think about this on a fundamental level, and their life is way harder because of it. Like whenever I'm trying to get to an end destination, I think about what are the things and people that will stop me. And then in turn, if you figure out what matters to them, they become the easiest way to get what you want. So in my opinion, even as we go towards tech, I still think in the short term, studying of human beings and psychology is one of the highest ROI things you could possibly do. I would recommend people pick up Oh, I have so many books in here that I could recommend. But Influence by Robert Cialdini, Propaganda by Edward Bernays. I want to do a full episode on Edward Bernays because there's also some crazy connections to him. He's the pioneer of propaganda. And do you know who is it great grandson or maybe grandson? Do you know do you know who they are, Keith?
No, I don't.
One of the co-founders of Netflix.
Wow.
And if you think that's a coincidence, I would love to hear why, because like that, it's just insane to think about how connected all these things are. I also want to do an episode on the banking system. We talked about that, but so also here is a really good point where these tech changes are based on binary mathematics, science, and logic. And I would say yes, absolutely. To go to your point, where life isn't like that, but a lot of the things that we do in life are. And so the optimist approach would be hopefully that opens up people's time to do more of the things that aren't. Go ahead, Keith.
I just wanted to respond to Matthew, highly recommending John Vervaeke. That name sounds so familiar, but I actually don't know his work. The first thing that I saw pull up that caught my eye was an interview that he did with Andre Decume. And that's really cool. Do you know who that is? Andre Decume? Ben, do you watch any of his stuff?
That name does not sound familiar. Oh yeah, I've seen a bunch of his stuff. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've seen his show a bunch actually. The guy, one of my favorite episodes was the guy with the really big hair. He was on Rogan recently.
Oh, I have no idea. He's been absolutely crushing it. It's cool to see because what he does is like, I don't know, I feel like it's pretty unique. And to see him doing so well with that is cool. So, and to see that he's talking with scientists, he does stuff with like, I think the guy's name is like something Dawkins. No, not Dawkins. What's that guy's name? Anyways, it's like this really cool convergence of where like science and consciousness kind of meet. And to have this John Vervaeke guy on there is very interesting because I'm seeing that he's a cognitive scientist. Yep.
Have you read any of Joe Dispenza's books, Keith?
I actually have not read his books. I've only listened to him.
Okay.
But
he goes on that show too. He goes on a bunch.
Yeah. I was actually.
Go ahead.
I was talking to somebody about him last night, and they were like, he called himself a recovering New Ager, and I thought that was pretty funny. When I brought up Joe Dispenza in particular, that's what he said, and I was like, okay, interesting, and I understand where you're coming from, because I met a guy a couple of years ago. He said that postmodernism, because I didn't know, I had never heard that term at the time, which is essentially a lot of this like thought of like life has the meaning to which you create for it. I think it's kind of like what postmodernism means from basics standpoint. And he was like, a lot of that like postmodernist stuff, like Alan Watts, maybe Joe Dispenza-ish, not necessarily, but that new age kind of thinking. He was like, he called it mental self-pleasing. And I thought that was a very interesting concept, because I'm like, I mean, it's not false. It's like this like law of attraction manifestation stuff. And we've talked about this a little bit. It's like that stuff without the application, right? Without actually doing things, it's not going to help you any, or not as much, at least, as it as to do things with it. But anyways, a little bit of a tangent talking about Joe Dispenza.
Roderick says, entrepreneur or not, entrepreneur is an example of a binary solution to the problem is too complex for such a simple resolution. So, but I think that comes down to a language issue in terms of what is your definition of what an entrepreneur is. Like, I think that's more so where we have a lot of these, like most of these problems that we have right now is because language that we've talked about before is an incredibly inefficient mechanism of communication when there's the level of nuance and depth behind all of these things we're saying, right? Because when I say entrepreneur, the visual that comes to mind is so dramatically different depending on who I'm speaking to.
Yeah. So two things. I got to comment on this. So Akin, not convinced everybody's going to be an entrepreneur, is going to work for all people. I think what we're trying to tap in on here, guys, is like, not everybody is going to be watching this podcast, right? Like there's a very, very specific demographic that's watching this, and you people are. those people.
Yeah, and so much like Salim said, the example, right, where if they sort out UBI, it's like you can survive not being an entrepreneur, but your life would be greatly enhanced if you were.
Mhm.
And so, go ahead, Keith.
If everyone's striving to be an entrepreneur, who's going to do the work? Robots. We're going to be programming them to do the things that we need done. So I'll step back from there.
No, that's fair. Yeah, no, it's and great questions, everybody. I think that this is really the whole reason we run the show, is to say our opinions, have them be challenged, and because we're all coming to the table with such a different set of biases, experiences, projections, all that, right? So isn't psychology in finance just the neuroscience to achieve its goals? Isn't psychology in finance just using neuroscience to achieve its goals?
Whose goals?
Yeah, I'm not totally sure I understand that question. Yeah, so I don't want to touch it and go completely the wrong direction. If you could provide some additional clarification, then I'll definitely try.
Yes, another Kevin says, hello to the fellow wavelengths. Yes,
Is
sir.
there a Telegram or a group Discord for us? LOL. Yeah, we're definitely going to have that in the future. And then we got a lot of plans for the show. We're just in full growth mode right now in terms of getting content out there and getting guests scheduled and all that stuff. But there's a lot of plans for more connection. Most of it will be free. We will have some exclusive perks behind, like I say, a Patreon or channel memberships, etc. But we're gonna try to keep as much as we possibly can free so that we can do this stuff with everyone. Like shiny red apple, let's make apple soda.
I don't know.
Do you understand what's Waffle's saying?
I have no idea. What up, Waffle? Appreciate your engagement.
Are you saying that we're just defaulting towards seeing something and thinking about how we can make money from it? Is that what you mean? I'm not totally sure. That's
an interesting interpretation right there. That's pretty good.
Like, isn't marketing just using neuroscience to get your brain to feel and think certain things? I think, yeah, totally. That's why I'm saying that I think that the best things to study are that, because I think a lot of people are studying things and calling them other things, but that to its core, that's really what most of the really influential subjects are. And I was trying to get a tweet out last night, but I couldn't find the words to frame it, where I was like, if people understood how effective propaganda is, people would have a very different relationship in terms of how valuable, say, a marketing or a psychology degree really is. It's just because, unfortunately, most of these people that go into those fields, they do it more so because they're not because they're passionate, but more so because it's the path of least resistance, right? Where they go into these, and because they think it's broadly applicable, they're doing it more so for the optionality it brings them at the end of their degree, rather than what it could be using it for themselves. Right. And I think that's really why a lot of people don't take what you could from it. Language has an interdependent relationship with perception and thought. It's not binary like everything else in life. Yeah. Language is tough. Keith is a big fan of language because it is one of the most important tools that we have as people. But
speaking of language, Roderick, I think your favorite word is binary.
Yeah. Big binary guy. But no, you've got
interdependent relationship with perception and thought.
Well, language can be in lower level of communication. Yeah, we've talked about this too, Kevin, where language, although we consider it the most sophisticated form of communicating, it's a fairly inefficient one. We've actually talked about that at length before, about how maybe as we were given the gift of language, was it really a curse and a mechanism for division rather than inclusion? And then is this Gook? Says, Keith, a bit more volume, just a bit more. Thank you. Turn.
Yeah, let me back up from the mic.
What is the mic? Are you using the same mic?
Yeah, I don't know. He's saying that my volume is just too loud.
I think I think I might be able to turn your mic down. Actually, let me see. I think you can too. I think producer Kurt can as well. Let me try to figure this out. Oh, whoops. How are we?
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you. I don't think anyone else can, but we can. Thanks for doing that. But yeah, okay. I see it here now. You man, keep the picture, because you know it takes a picture when you first start. Your picture is hilarious, dude. I'm gonna send this to you personally. Kirk, can you see this? What do you see? I'm gonna send this in the group chat. It's just like mine's like a straight crotch shot of Keith.
Other Kevin said something interesting. He said language is just symbols as letters to articulate a concept. When I was in high school, I started reading this book called Mind. It's a collection of essays called Mind, Self, and Society by a guy named George Herbert Mead. And the whole book goes over like 3 major concepts. One of them is, I feel like I've talked about this before, symbolic behaviorism. And like this idea that you can communicate things outside of just, it's such a crazy read. And this was forever ago that I read it, but like you can communicate things outside of language, obviously. Like symbolic behaviorism in its simple terms would be, body language, right? Like if I raise my hand, that has meaning to it and people respond to that. And the other one was, oh my goodness, symbolic behaviorism and some sort of interactionism. And I'm losing my mind because I forgot what it was, but it's such an interesting concept.
We find it, jump back in. But Waffle, I want to go with you on this one. So marketing is just, I want you to buy something. How can I get you to do that? Yes, but that's more a symptom of the current system that we operate in, right? Marketing was different throughout history when there was different incentive structures and different priorities for people navigating the system that they're forced to operate within. You need to get Waters Above on here. I don't know if I'm familiar with Waters Above. Are you, Keith?
Yeah, I had him on my main channel, actually. He was that long form that we did with him.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Okay, my bad. So the 2 concepts were symbolic interactionism and social behaviorism. And like, okay, so social behaviorism focuses on how social interactions, gestures, and meaningful symbols drive behavior. It sees humans as active participants in creating their social world through communication. And then the concept of symbolic interactionism is a theory that emphasizes how the self, mind, and society emerge from social interactions. And like this book is like, it's like I guess it's a philosophical, it's philosophy. But if anyone's into anything like that, I highly, highly recommend reading that. And I need to reread it as well, obviously, because I have nothing more to say than those 2 things.
Totally. Yeah, if y'all are here live and you've yet to click subscribe, please do us the favor of doing that now. We are really, really close to 1,000, and that really helps us get the ball rolling to get more guests on here and all that stuff too. Definitely gonna hit up Salim after this to help us get in contact with the people that he mentioned that would be good fits as well. You can see marketing as shifting from supply side to demand side, meaning that marketing instead of focusing on pushing products. Yeah, right. That's more so what I was trying to say. You said it way better than I did, Ken. Right, where it changes to the environment in which it's needed. Right, and so if the positive things do happen, then you would hope that the positive marketers would then take a different approach. Much like when we had what were we talking about? Where Rome, where basically the incentive structures back in the day was more so to build something for the community, and so you got rewarded for doing that. Like a great marketer would essentially try to do the exact same thing, ideally, right? I think it was Hunter who said that, and so that's something too. The reason why I'm mentioning binary or linear so much is because that way of thinking is the problem. The world is non-linear. The structure of the computer mathematics is based on binary design. I completely agree with you, but everything that we are navigating in the systems in which we're forced to navigate, they operate on similar principles. And so I think that eventually we maybe get to a different point, but there's a lot of steps that have to go that way in which that type of thinking changes.
In my head, I'm trying to think out something, and it's probably wrong, Roderick, and you can respond. Like, it's like I might know or understand that the world is non-binary, non-linear, but I have to make decisions. And Jeff, the first thing that comes to my mind is Jeff Bezos every day has to make decisions. And this comes to my mind because you hear that he has to make, right, so many different really high impact decisions. And whether or not, right, like the outcomes of the decisions that we're all making, we don't always know because it's non-binary, non-linear world that we live in.
Mhm.
But we still have to make decisions. And so in that, what's even more important than recognizing that in particular might be being able to quickly say, okay, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that anyway. But obviously that doesn't equate to non-binary, right? Because you can have 10 different decisions, right, that you could be making, or 10 different options for the decision that you're making. So I'm trying to think about that in real time, but I think that there's something around like being an entrepreneur or not. Like, I don't know if that's the point as much as like start moving in the direction of building the skills that you will need anyways. Because some people won't be entrepreneurs, but some people will also like be completely impoverished.
Yes. Yeah, and I also think that a lot of like, we've talked about this a bunch too, but the system that told you not to be an entrepreneur is really the system that's necessitizing that you become one, right? And you're fighting a lot of programming that came from navigating that whole system. And then there's a point right here where Kevin said something quite deep. Who is the one navigating? I think he's referring to what I had said before. Maybe the one navigating is only a character you are aware of, and defining the experience you're navigating is what you can control. So that's like, are we, that comes down to your complete views on what reality is, in my opinion, in terms of, are we projecting the reality? Are we truly experiencing it? Or are we creating it? Like, there's so many ways in which you can approach that. And the problem with when you talk about that kind of stuff is that there's really no end, because you can't, like, the scientific method is that, right? You can repeatable, all that stuff. Like, how do you do that with any of these things?
In the scientific method, this was funny. This came from Andre de Cume and talking with Richard something. And the scientific process, this is so random. It always has assumptions. Like you're never actually like solving you never actually get the answer because you're always having to make assumptions on whatever it is that you're solving for. So you then have to go back and then question the assumptions and then like prove the assumptions at some point. But like it's never possible to actually finish and complete that process because of that. Because you always need an assumption. I don't know if that contributed anything to the conversation, but I saw some other, yeah.
It's what I want to talk about this. So all I'm saying is marketing folks are those who use the power of psychology and neuroscience to sell you something, not help you with your health. So that's just because that's the current incentive structure, right? I'm not going to go. The unfortunate reality is that like you said, life ain't free. And so if I'm the best, I'm going to work for myself or work for a company that can reward me within the system. And I do think that if we can get away from a lot of these things, then hopefully people would shift towards helping you with your health, right? Like the best marketer, if that's rewarded, and the structure is more so like how many people did you help, and that's actually like the biggest reward, even socially, then the best marketers would go there and they would do that. But that's not really rewarded these days. It's how many dollars do you have? And that's kind of on us as people to change how we view people, right? Like, and I know I see this even with some of the people that I love dearly. Like the first thing they go to when they describe someone is how well off they are. And I personally find that crazy, because I'm like, that is the last thing that I really care to ask about someone if I'm spending time with them, because I care more about the individual, not how they navigated within the system or the hand that they were dealt or the money that they inherited, right? So I think our value system, which has been fed to us, also has to change for those kinds of things to change.
Yeah. I always love like hearing people's lines of questioning sometimes. Like I was at like a meetup earlier today, and like when people are like trying to get to know each other in like a networking kind of a place, like some people are going to try to figure out like who the person is, and then some people are going to try to figure out like where they're at.
Yeah.
You know,
You can always tell right away. And I can always tell where people are in terms of like vibration based on how many questions I have to ask them before they ask anything about me. And I have gone on like thousands and thousands of conversations of people I've met across the world. And I would say it's a staggeringly low number of how many people will reciprocate that. And it's great for like someone who loves data points, because I love learning from different people. But it is shocking how long a conversation will go on. And I'm like, you know nothing about me. Like not a single thing. And I'm cool with that.
I always feel terrible when that happens, because sometimes you get caught up being passionate, you know, for me, about whatever it is. Like some people will ask really good questions, and then I'll like get caught up. But
Totally.
no, I mean, like for me, I have to very consciously be like, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa.
See, I default
Ask
the
them
questions
back.
first. Even when like people ask me questions, I usually spin it on them first. I get them to answer like 100 questions, and then if they actually care about what I'm going to say, because I'll base it on context too, right? If I don't know a lot about the person, I can't shape the conversation. And so a lot of times when you'll hear me where I'm talking and then I change my point of thought, it's because I'm thinking through who's listening to it and what they're coming to it with. And so if I don't have enough data points to do that, the conversation won't be as effective for me or them. And I might just be talking to myself and jerking myself off intellectually, right? If they can't comprehend what I'm about to say, what's the point in saying it? But where's this one that was really good here? So Waffle, great points throughout. So the test of love, bro, will you help people who need your skills to make life better, or do you want to make a ton of money from it? Yeah, and I think it's a combination of the two is probably where we end up. And I think that the whole concept of ethical entrepreneurship is something that we've tried to coin here. And I think that will become more of a thing, right? I think that we'll talk about how much money we made, but I think we can also talk about the genuine impact that it had on people's lives. And so it's also on us as entrepreneurs to go take on the big challenges that are currently being held by people who that's not a priority of theirs. I also hope that a lot less big companies will go public, because that then creates the incentive structure that leads to a lot of this.
100%, man. All of my devices are about to die at this particular moment.
Okay, let's wrap it up here then. Okay, well, thank you all so much for showing up, everybody. If you've yet to click subscribe, please, I'm gonna keep asking that until I'm gonna keep asking that forever. So just keep clicking that and hit the bell too, so that we get notified. And Keith, I'll let you wrap up before everything dies.
Yeah, everything. I mean, be sure to also like, and
that helps
if
a lot.
if you're not here live, we're doing this every Tuesday and Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. So be there.
And we're going to start getting some crazy guests on here as well that you do not want to miss. So
crazy.
It won't just be us yapping. It'll be a lot of that, but there'll also be some amazing guests that come through. So definitely please participate. You guys are why we do this. It's so fun to talk to you guys, and you guys are some incredibly intelligent people.
Yeah.
And so if you have friends that are like you, not a lot of people have spaces like this. And so that's why we created this, largely selfishly, because we want to talk to people like yourself. So definitely get more people in here that can contribute.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah. Kurt, you want to pull us off stage?